Meeting for June 26th. Will everyone please stand for the pledge? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, you will notice that Dr. Jarvis is not here this evening, and Mr. Zettel will be fulfilling that role this evening, and it is also Mr. Zettel's last board meeting as he comes to the conclusion of his career with the Santa Barbara School Districts on June 30th. Okay, this is exciting, getting to sit in for the superintendent on your last board meeting. Okay. I have several announcements to make from closed session. Item B1, public employment, appointment of the Santa Barbara High School principal. The board voted 3-1-1, 3-1, Noel, no, and Cordero, an abstention, to support the appointment of Paul Caprito as the Santa Barbara High School principal.
Only I think it's Mark.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Item B2, consideration of the KC waivers for graduation for students with disabilities. Motion by Cordero, second by Malakoff, and the vote was 5-0 to approve. Item B3, consideration of KC exemption for graduation for students with disabilities. Motion by Parker, second by Cordero, vote 5-0 to approve the exemptions. There were two closed session items of student discipline. Item 060768, and it was a request for a 30-day extension. A motion by Parker, second by Malakoff, and a vote of 4-1, the no being Noel, to permit the extension. Item B5, case number 0506-49, it was to deny the request for readmission to Santa Barbara High School. Motion by Parker, second by Noel, vote of 5-0. And the rest of the student discipline cases we'll get to later in the meeting. Spanish translation. I think we have Alma Flores. Oh, thank you.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Alma Flores y si necesita los servicios de un intérprete estoy disponible.
Thank you very much. And as indicated on the slide, there's headsets available for the hearing impaired. Did announcement of closed session action, acceptance of donations.
Move to accept with gratitude.
Second?
Thank you. All those in favor of accepting the donations with gratitude signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So those are approved 5-0. And now we are on to introductions, proclamations, presentations, or recognitions. And Mr. Zettel will be doing that this evening.
Thank you, President Harder. I'm very pleased tonight to be standing here and presenting this award to one of our finest teachers. Earlier this month, the County Education Office named 3 2007-2008 Santa Barbara County Distinguished Educators. One of the 3 teachers named was Santa Barbara Junior High School's Marilyn Garza. Marilyn has taught 8th grade physical science and math at Santa Barbara Junior High for 11 years. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree in Material Science Engineering from UC Berkeley and her Master's of Ed degree and teaching credential from UC Santa Barbara. She's a member of Women Educators in Science and Technology. She's also served as a BITSA mentor for beginning teachers and taken part in the South Coast Science Institute, the Research Experience for Teachers program, GATE training and conferences, and the Science Partnership for School Innovation. She's been awarded 3 Impact 2 Disseminator grants and has been the recipient of an LEAPS National Science Foundation grant, for which she is the lead teacher at her school. She served on the STAR Science Content Review panel, the South Coast Science Project, and has attended conferences regarding closing the achievement gap. California Nanosystems Institute Education Director Fiona Goodchild summarized Marilyn's strengths when she said, "Marilyn is a remarkable teacher, clear in her expectations, patient in her explanations, and encouraging in her feedback on performance. She demonstrates the qualities that have enabled her to make such a positive contribution to science education in Santa Barbara County. The first is her own curiosity and enthusiasm for her subject. Second is her belief that every student can gain from learning science, and especially in terms of understanding the world around them. A third asset is her vision of how to integrate scientific research into K-12 school programs. She's a natural leader and a wonderful model for the teaching profession." Congratulations, Marilyn, and could you come up and receive your plaque? Don't be shy.
I'd like to thank the board for recognizing my achievements, and I'm deeply honored. Thank you very much.
And we want to thank you. That was a remarkable list of accomplishments, and I think we are very, very proud to have you teaching at Santa Barbara Junior High. And it looks like you have a couple of future scientists with you.
And I,
Thank you.
having a son who had you as a teacher and found you inspirational, I want to personally thank you. And he's going on in science and math at UCLA.
Thank you so much, Ms. Garza. Okay. Item C7 was the superintendent's report, and it says presented by the assistant superintendent.
I'm very glad to be here, standing in stead for Dr. Sarvis. This week, Dr. Sarvis is meeting with educators in China, so he's not able to be here. Summer school in our secondary district began at most campuses on June 20th, 2007. Unfortunately, during the first 3 days, we had some disciplinary problems at the combined DP and San Marcos High School summer program. The problems were addressed swiftly and resulted in 14 suspensions. And I have to say, I was out there walking the campus with our campus security, our school resource officers, our assistant principals and principal, and by the time I got there, it was all fine. Kids were doing very, very well, and I think you know, with the issues that they had right off the bat, they were taken care of and quickly, and the presence of everyone on that campus has really calmed the situation down, and we're very glad for that. I think our kids are making better decisions now. In the elementary district, we're very excited about a newly designed Fun in the Sun program at Harding and Franklin schools. We're collaborating in a different manner with United Way and their Fun in the Sun program this year. The summer program runs from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. It's unique and proactive in that district teachers are teaching targeted academic instruction each morning that is structured to provide students with experiences that link to the content standards that students will encounter this fall. Pre-teaching, it's the best way to get kids to really focus and learn. Then students participate in an enrichment program for the balance of the day. United Way and collaborating partners have put together field trips and other enrichment activities designed to fill in background knowledge and vocabulary and conceptual understanding for next year's curriculum. One special treat is that the children are provided with free swim instruction and swimsuits. The program ends on August, thank goodness. The program ends on August 10th. We'll be looking at student performance data to see if this model can be expanded to other schools. Annual SELT testing for grades K-12 begins July 2nd, and testing opportunities continue through October 31st. The CELDT stands for California English Language Development Test, and it's administered to English learners. And this ends the superintendent's report. Thank you.
Short report indicating the beginning of summer, I guess.
Yes.
And I want to turn it over to Ms. Sawaski for a moment.
Okay, and Mr. Zettel, you need to come down to the podium with me. Jan Zettel has been with the Santa Barbara School Districts for 3 years now, right? But Jan has been all over this state, And he brought with him to Santa Barbara school districts a wealth of knowledge about how different school districts and different county offices go about their business of education. He seems like everywhere we would go together, not just in this area, but all over, if we'd go to a conference in Sacramento or San Diego, Jan always knew about 10 people there. I mean, his networking and his, the level of knowledge that he brought to this job and the people he knew was just invaluable to our district. I mean, we've really made a lot of connections through Jan that we'll continue to have, and our district will find value from that for a long time. Jan he's got such a varied background from working in a K-8 school. He started out with gifted children in elementary setting. He's been a principal of a comprehensive high school. He's worked at a county level. He's run technology programs. I mean, he's really kind of done it all. He's really worked at every level. He was with the California School Leadership Academy, which is a very distinguished group of administrators in the state that really work on leadership. And so it was really a great experience for 3 years to have Jan settled. I could go on and on with what Jan has brought, but now he's ready to retire. However, he's not really retiring. He's going on to a new adventure. He's moving back to Redding, where he and his wife own a house, and he'll be by his kids and grandkids. But we wanted to send him off with a memory from Santa Barbara, first of all. Maybe you should open it. It's not a swimsuit, yeah.
I don't think I'm wearing a swimsuit ever again, actually.
This is so you won't forget us. Let's hope. We're hoping that actually he is working for the Edison schools, and we hope that he will have some vacation time. But we hope with this Santa Barbara photograph book he won't forget where he came from. Sure, sure. Well, thank you. And one last thing, we know that Jan, in his spare time, he wants to go fishing. There's lots of rivers and lakes up there, and so we're hoping that you have lots of time to fish with your captain hat. And thank you from everyone, Jan. We've loved having you here.
Oh, gosh. I'm not prepared, but, oh, Lord. Uh-oh.
Hi, I'm Sarah Hanna with the Parks and Recreation Department. And on behalf of the City of Santa Barbara and the Parks and Recreation Department, we wanted to extend to Jan our sincere appreciation for all of his collaboration with us, his cooperative spirit, and his years of support of community recreation in school district facilities. And Jan, we're really going to miss you. It's been really a pleasure working with you, and we wish you many, many happy years of retirement. So
Thank you so much.
congratulations.
Thank you.
And
Oh, my gosh.
yeah, don't put it on your wall, and you won't need it for a resume. So
Not anymore.
congratulations. Thanks very much.
Wow, I don't know what to say. I think the memories that I'll take from Santa Barbara will certainly be the people that I've worked with. That's the strongest connection for me, and I've worked with some champions, from the board to the superintendent to the team that works in the district office, our principals and our teachers, right on down. Everybody is so incredible to work with and so dedicated to our students. And the little bit that I've been able to contribute to the children of Santa Barbara, I'm very grateful for the opportunity, and I want to thank everyone for that. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Zettel. It has been a pleasure, but the pleasure's not over with yet. We still have tonight to deal with this meeting. Okay, okay.
I'm ready for anything.
We are on to public comment, and I think we have a few slips.
Sarah, that was it? Okay, okay. Then we have Lanny Ebenstein.
President Harder, members of the board. Mr. Zettel, congratulations. I'm here this evening to bring you up to date somewhat on discussions of various members of the community on the possibility of a parcel tax, and also to make a request. I believe that the next board meeting at which this item will be considered is the July 10th board meeting. And there are a number of people who would like to address the board on this topic, some of whom have young children, elementary parents, and we were hoping that there might be able to be a time certain of either 7:45 or 8 o'clock p.m. For that agenda item. I know that sometimes the conference agenda item is later in the evening. On the other hand, I'm also aware that during the summer there's a little bit more flexibility, so if that were able to be accommodated, that would sure help us out. And I think there are really, and as I've talked to people, and a number of people have been discussing this, it's interesting how much interest and support there is in the community in this possibility. And while some of these comments will be made at the July 10th meeting, just to make a couple of them now of points you may wish to consider. One is that a number of us really hope that the board will give consideration to placing a parcel tax in the elementary district on either the June or even February 2008 ballot. And the reason for either of those dates is primarily that would allow funding for the 2008-09 school year, whereas a parcel tax election even in November of 2008 would not be able to be effective until the 2009-10 school year. So I think that there's merit to going sooner rather than later. Secondly, it's the thought of a number of individuals that it would be worthwhile to look sequentially, not at the same election, but sequentially, if an elementary district parcel tax were successful at a parcel tax in the secondary district, and there's no general election scheduled for 2009. So in other words, if there were a successful elementary parcel tax vote at either February or June of 2008, that would allow a secondary district parcel tax to be considered either for June of 2008 or November of 2008. And if it weren't then it couldn't be until 2010, presumably. So anyway, that is another consideration that you may wish to consider. So in any event, with those thoughts, it's something that, as I say, I believe there's a number of people who are eager to address the board on this topic, and hope that the board will continue to consider this possibility. Thank you.
Thank you. I will have the superintendent's office get in touch with you about the agenda item and the time.
Great. Oh, one other thing too. We have got some draft language that, just for your information, may be of interest, and I'll send copies around there, and then also drop a copy with Mrs. County for her and the superintendent when he returns.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was our sole public comment for the evening. We're on to our consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'd like to pull some items.
Okay.
D20, D21, D23, and D28.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. No, that's it.
Okay. Anything else from any other board members? Then a motion with the exception of 20, 21, 23, and 28.
Move to approve?
Second?
Thank you, Ms. Cordero and Ms. Parker. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda with the exception of 20, 21, 23, and 28 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And we will get to those items later in the evening. On to our action agenda. Item E1, approval of the Insurance Committee's recommendation for medical insurance coverage for the 2007-2008 school year, with a presentation from Dr. Robertson and Ms. Alvarado.
Good evening. Nice to be here tonight, and I want to take the opportunity to welcome some guests we have here tonight to explain to you the process that we underwent with the Insurance Committee and negotiating a new health welfare benefit package for next year. in the era of double-digit increases with health welfare benefits, I'm very pleased to say, after very hard work by the committee, we were able to negotiate a 5.19% increase, as opposed to 15% is where it started off. I would like to just briefly mention, before I invite up the members of Alliant Insurance, that the committee members included Ed Diaz, Elaine Alvarado, Brian Tangway, Steve Thompson, James Griffin, Ken Stevens, Lane Wheeler, Roberta Ortega, and then we had several advisors, including Noemi Vasquez, Celeste Perdue, Bill Millard, and Cindy Heller on the sidelines. And I don't want to say too much because I think they have a wonderful presentation for you. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Michael Conrad to you from Alliant Insurance, and he will introduce the rest of his members.
Good evening. We thought we had electronic copies of this presentation somewhere here in the building. We don't, so we'll walk through the hard copies. If you could bear with me. Then we'll put the hard copy on the screen.
Michael, I apologize for that. That is sitting on my computer. So I dropped the ball on that one. Everyone needs to know. Sorry.
Okay. Well, to the clearly, you know, Dr. Robertson teed it up and removed the mystery around the renewal, where we finally ended up on the medical side at an increase of 5.19%. I'll walk through the steps of how we got there and kind of the thought process of the committee. Dr. Robinson mentioned those who participated in this process, and let me back up for a second. Again, I'm Michael Conrad from Alliant Insurance Service. Alliant Insurance Services, we are the consultant on behalf of the district's benefit program. Work with Vicki Burris, a colleague of mine, as well as Michael Strobe, who helped deal with kind of the negotiations, the review of materials from carriers, and finalizing this renewal process, meeting with the committee on a number of occasions. And thanks for your time tonight. You know, I'd like to just recognize the work that the committee did. I know there's some members here. I see Lane out back. It was a you know, a commitment of time and resource, and a real commitment to being flexible and gaining consensus and determining what was the best option from a benefit program perspective, financially competitive services, you know, for all the constituent groups involved. And by undertaking a transparent process, I think we got there with a very good result, and the work of these people really needs to be recognized. On to page 3, relative to the annual objectives. And I don't think these objectives change year to year, whether it be Santa Barbara School District or another school district we may work with. At the end of the day, we want to determine what is the most competitive benefit plan available to the members of the Santa Barbara School District. And by competitive, the highest quality and most significant access from a network perspective, HMO or PPO providers, best-in-class clinical capabilities and expertise. Does your vendor have programs available that help employees get healthy and manage their health and give them resources to seek the right care at the right time? That is an area we always look at in evaluating the competitive nature of your offering. The financial piece is an obvious piece because it's such a big number relative to a budget, so we reviewed that as well. Customer service. You know, the feedback we got from the committee was that the Blue Shield program was working well. Employees seemed to be happy with the service they were getting from a claim and member services perspective. And as we went through this and talked to other carriers out there, wanted to make sure we continued to improve that service. And if we did look at a change, really evaluate, make sure that we weren't going to move backwards relative to customer service. I personally look at customer service as kind of like a referee or an umpire in a sporting event. If no one's complaining about the carrier from a claim payment perspective, they're typically doing a good job. If you don't notice a referee in a football game, they're typically doing a good job at the end of the day. So we did look at that relative to Blue Shield and other options out in the market. We looked at trust options. That was brought up by the committee. So we went ahead and did that through Dr. Robertson's office. And a big component of this year's renewal analysis and negotiation was the mandate to develop and offer a plan to employees that we called it a catastrophic type plan, but it was a plan that had to be built from a benefit perspective that would get us to a $615 tenthly rate. So the mandate was, here's the rate, now go find a plan that you could fit into that $615 tenthly rate. So that was part of the marketing we did to other vendors as well as our negotiations with Blue Shield. So that kind of teed up how we began the renewal process. Summary activities on page 4. We sent a number of proposals out to both, as I mentioned, trust and the direct market. Direct market would be all those insurance carrier names that you'd recognize, you see on billboards, radio ads, so on and so forth. We did receive proposals back from HealthNet, Pacific Care, as well as Skeet and Central Valley Trust. So that was the universe of our analysis, as well as the Blue Shield renewal. Pacific Care, they did provide a financially competitive proposal at first glance. From looking at the rates of the Pacific Care plan compared to the initial renewal, it was competitive. There were a number of benefit, I'll call them deviations, benefit takeaways when you lined up their proposal relative to the current high, low, and PPO offerings by Blue Shield that we needed to deal with. And the most significant hole in the Pacific Care proposal was they did not have a solution to this catastrophic plan at the $615 tenthly rate. The HealthNet proposal was not competitive. CVT and Skeet weren't competitive financially. From the trust perspective, there was a mandate of 100% participation of all employees within the district in order for their proposal to be valid. From the committee's perspective in the district, it was a non-starter. So we had some next steps off that initial review, conversations with the committee. How do we build the catastrophic plan? What will Blue Shield allow? What will Pacific Care do? So we left that meeting with a mandate to negotiate further with Pacific Care and Blue Shield in order to come up with, back to my initial comments around the most competitive option, how do we get there? So we had several conversations with Pacific Care to try and solve the catastrophic plan design, couldn't get there. With Blue Shield, we used the leverage of the Pacific Care proposal. Clearly in any negotiation, we didn't go in there and say, well, they're more competitive, but there are holes in their proposal. Conversations were around, there's a viable option out there that the district is seriously looking at. So with that as a backdrop, we went in using kind of the financial tools that we use in looking at a renewal and negotiated their renewal. Again, started at in the 15% range. We're finishing at just over +5 with the introduction of this catastrophic plan. So they did, they got the message and came to the table and sat down and negotiated. They're, off the pure dollar perspective, their concessions were north of $340,000 in this negotiation process with Blue Shield this year. And maybe most importantly, they worked with us to build this catastrophic HMO plan and came in just under the $615 tenthly rate. It is a catastrophic HMO plan that they are willing to offer. They do have filed. The hospital benefits, you as whoever elects that plan is responsible for 40% of the hospital cost. I think their primary care physician copay is $40. So it is a plan that's really designed to be utilized for an unforeseen catastrophe. It's not a plan that someone would elect if they had a chronic condition they needed to manage, or if they had young children, immunization. This is really, I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a plan that, younger single people employed by the district are going to take who think they'll, we're able to roll the dice on their health for a while. But we did get that plan built with Blue Shield. Additionally, we presented several plan design options. The committee seemed most interested in the introduction of a $150 drug deductible for brand name drugs, both formulary and non-formulary drugs. As we looked at the analysis in that, the introduction of the deductible was almost directly offset by the premium reduction for those people in the plan. So it was one of those discussion points that let's implement the plan change, because for those people that are going to utilize brand name drugs are going to have to pay the deductible. They would have paid it in premium anyway, and those who are not utilizing brand name drugs are going to get a break in their premium costs. So jump the gun a little bit onto page 6. The committee recommendations, what came out of the couple months of work we did on the renewal from the medical side, the committee's recommending that the district renews with Blue Shield at the 5.19% increase. The plan design change I referenced on the pharmacy, committee recommends to implement that. Generic drugs are not subject to that pharmacy deductible I talked about. Implementation of the catastrophic HMO plan alongside the current high and low HMO as well as the PPO. A footnote on the PPO being offered. This was another area of somewhat lengthy and almost contentious negotiations with Blue Shield at time. The PPO program and both HMOs being left in alongside the catastrophic HMO. So where this was finalized, the PPO program, the slide says grandfathered, PPO programs frozen to new enrollees. Okay, retirees, with the exception of those retirees who move out of state, don't have access to a Blue Shield HMO, they can elect the PPO. But in order to have the existing plan, the existing HMOs offered to employees, as well as a new catastrophic plan, there had to be an agreement from the district to freeze new enrollment into the PPO, which the committee was comfortable with and thought that made sense. So that's the recommendation on the medical. Dental, there was no renewal increase requested from Blue Cross on the dental. Committee's recommendation is to accept that rate pass and renew. Vision, we're in the middle of a 2-year rate guarantee, so didn't look at making a move there. And Blue Cross Life Insurance, there was not an increase requested, so the committee is recommending that plan gets renewed as well. Slide 7 kind of lays out for you what the plan designs will look like for the 2007 plan year, which is going to be effective October 1. Enrollment by plan, what the rates are, and kind of get you a premium calculation down to the 5.19% increase. So total medical expenditure going for active employees going from about $9 million to $9.5 million for the 2007 plan year. We did make an assumption. You see 66 enrollees in the catastrophic HMO 3. Our discussion with the committee and Blue Shield, we assumed 15% of those employees enrolled in the low HMO plan would take this catastrophic plan. How we got there was looking at the census, determining out of those in the low HMO plan, and I think that the age cutoff we used, everyone under 30 who was single, that was the most likely group to take this plan. So that's kind of the methodology we used to develop this $9.5 million premium projection for 2007. Slide 8 is just kind of summarize what the dental plan looks like and confirms the current and renewal rates going forward for 2007. Similar situation on page 9 relative to the vision rates. No changes to the existing plan or rates. And then the life and the AD&D plan on slide number 10 confirms the current benefits as well as the current premium rates and costs for 2007. No change there. The final slide is on slide 11, just a confirmation of the timeline relative to open enrollment being targeted for August 1st. Our presentation here tonight on June 26th. Once we get sign off on the recommendations, begin to produce employee communication materials for enrollment. go through open enrollment in August with an October 1, 2007 effective date. So that is kind of the formal portion of my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions relative to what's in here, the process, anything relative to the benefit plan.
Thank you, Mr. Conrad. Questions, board members, for Mr. Conrad? I know some people, we may have some questions for Dr. Robertson as well, but with regard to the presentation that was just made. Any questions?
How do you communicate to the employees? What kind of,
Relative to the next year's, there'll be an enrollment communication piece that we'll work with the district. We at Alliant will work with to put together. We'll hold open enrollment meetings, which, health fair kind of thing, and answer questions relative to the plan. The communication piece this year will really have some depth to the issues around the catastrophic HMO plan. Our opinion is, in talking to Dr. Robertson, is certainly it's an option. It'll look great financially to some people, but it's something they really need to think about and consider. One hospitalization and your cost savings is probably out the window. And so that's how we'll communicate the plans to employees for this year.
Other questions? Ms. Parker?
Not for Mr. Conrad.
Okay. I actually, I have some questions too, but for Dr. Robertson. We may get back to you though, Mr. Conrad.
Okay.
But it was a very straightforward presentation. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Ms. Parker, do you want to go? I also have a question, but go ahead.
Well, I have a question for Mr. Diaz. This is an increase of 5.19% in health insurance costs, which is great and good news. How much, what percentage increase was budgeted for in the 0708 budget projections?
In the budget reductions?
In the budget projections for
Projections.
0708.
We budgeted the actual increase. 'Cause we had that number.
5.19. You had
We
that
had that
number
number.
a couple months ago.
At least in a timely fashion, so we budgeted the exact increase.
Okay, great.
But that's my question for Dr. Robertson. Contractually speaking, we are responsible for a 1% increase?
Over last year, yes,
Correct, okay.
with the rest being made up by staff.
Well, now, so your answer, Mr. Diaz, is 1% is built in? Be-
1%
The other 4.19 is up to negotiation.
was negotiated.
Was
Yes,
negotiated.
yes. Has been negotiated.
So you built,
So all the costs have been accounted for.
Other questions for Dr. Robertson? Wow, seems too easy, huh?
It's not.
wait a second. Can I ask a question about the difference between classified and certificated, how that works since we negotiated differently for this year? How does that affect next year, or does it?
Well, you'll have a tentative agreement coming to you later tonight that will probably explain that a little bit more. We negotiated all together since we had classified and certificated sitting on the committee. The recommendation was made, and then we sat down and negotiated with the CSEA. SBTA's already had a tentative agreement signed off, which included health, welfare, and benefits. So whatever we came up with was already. We just had to provide the catastrophic plan, and that was a monumental feat. So.
Other questions? No. I think after what we went through last year was our sort of trial by fire.
Yeah.
And this seems
Big time.
very, very straightforward. And the addition of the catastrophic, I think, is a huge benefit.
Well, I do want to commend the committee, and I also want to commend Alliant, and Vicki and Michael. And Michael have just been a tremendous help to us this year. No matter what we threw at them, they always had a smile on their face, and they came back with the information that we asked for. And this was not an easy process. So I really appreciate their help. So.
Thank you to the Alliant team. This is an action item.
I move to approve the Insurance Committee's recommendation for medical insurance coverage for the 0708 school year.
So, motion by Ms. Parker, second by Ms. Cordero. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the Insurance Committee's recommendation signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So it passes 5-0. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was a big accomplishment, yeah.
Years on this, and I'm really happy with the results that we finally have, and we've had an opportunity to be strategic, so it's been great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Burris. Thanks, Mr. Conrad, Mr. Schraub. Okay, whew, that was, yay. Okay, item E2, approval of the 2007 general obligation bond refunding. Mr. Diaz.
Yes, Madam President, we have with this is an item that the board has seen before, and we discussed it at our last meeting. It involves passing resolutions by both the high school district and the elementary district to form a JPA, which will be the vehicle, the entity, if you will, that will actually issue the bond, the refunding bonds. We have with us this evening Mr. Chick Adams from Jones Hall Law Firm, the bond counsel to this transaction. And Mr. Adams will walk us through the resolutions that need to be passed. We will ask the board, after passing the elementary and high school resolutions, to take a brief recess from our regular meeting. Thence, we will open a short meeting of the JPA, pass a couple of resolutions, and we're off to the races. So thank you. Mr. Adams?
Mr. Diaz.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz, President Harder, board members. My name is Charles Adams. I'm from the firm of Jones Hall. You'll recognize me from last month when I made a presentation on the formation of the Joint Powers Authority. Tonight, we have scheduled for you the complete wrap-up of all the transactions needed to refund the two outstanding bond issues, one of the elementary school district, one of the high school district. And I should say that following our meeting last time, I know a question came up from one or two of the board members about the districts, in fact, being separate as an elementary district and a high school district. We did research that further and had conversations with your general counsel, and we confirmed that that is our mutual interpretation of it. So I wanted to close the loop on that. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you want to have discussion first, or if you want to just walk through procedurally the resolutions that are on the agenda. We can take them one at a time. There are a number of them, and there's a logical order. They're all laid out in the correct order in the staff report. Whatever your pleasure
Let's stop right here for questions, Mr. Adams. Any board questions? Ms. Cordero.
I have questions on a couple of the resolutions. Should I ask all of them now, or do we want to go resolution by resolution?
Why don't we go resolution by resolution, okay. But any prefatory questions before we get started with that?
We had an issue with whether there was a decision that was come down whether we could do this.
Yes, that's a very good question, and it'll come up a bit later in one of the items. I'd like to make a comment on that. There is an Attorney General's opinion that has been requested. It was requested last November. No one knows what the status of it is. As I said last time, we believe it's addressing a different form of this transaction. We believe that the form that you're pursuing is perfectly sound legally. That opinion is shared by the Orrick Harrington firm, which is the largest bond counsel firm in the state. So we're comfortable with you going ahead at this time. There is a provision that the underwriter is requesting in the documents that if there's a negative Attorney General's opinion, the proceeds of the bonds might have to be used to offset the tax rate, and I think we talked about that last time too. So that remains a feature of this transaction, but there's no news to report.
Thanks, Mr. Adams.
I just have a little thing. Anybody reading this agenda might be confused. It refers to the $2.2 million as a cost. And at least my understanding was that it's a gain.
It is a gain, yes, you're correct. And I'm sure you've been cautioned that that's a preliminary number, and it'll depend on where the bond market is at the time, and interest rates have been pretty volatile in the last few weeks, so it's a moving target.
And I think that the board's fully aware of that.
Okay.
Okay. So shall we move piece by piece?
That would be great. The first two resolutions that are listed in the staff report, one is on behalf of the elementary school district and the other on behalf of the high school district. The two resolutions formally establish the Joint Powers Authority. That is a necessary first step because until the authority has been formed by those two resolutions, we don't actually have an entity that's created to take some of the actions later in the agenda. So that resolution simply approves the joint powers agreement that's been circulated and reviewed by your staff and your council, and once it's approved under the law, legally the authority comes into existence and can then take action.
I move to adopt.
Well, hang on. There's JPA 1 and there's JPA 2.
Well, actually, it's
Do we
even
wanna do
earlier
it
than
as
that. I can give you the titles. One, they each have in the title authorizing execution and delivery of joint exercise of powers agreement.
Correct.
So it's resolution number
I was-
0607-35, is that
That's
the
the
one?
one I was looking at when I made my motion.
Okay.
3.5.
3.5.
Okay, so we're dealing with elementary right now. So the title of it is Resolution of the Board of Education of the Santa Barbara Elementary School District authorizing execution and delivery of the joint exercise of powers agreement with the Santa Barbara High School District, establishing the Santa Barbara Schools Financing Authority. So there's a motion on the floor by Dr. Noel. Is there a second? I second it. Thank you, Ms. Malikoff. All those in favor of approving this resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
I move to adopt resolution 06/07-37.
Second?
Okay, so Noel and Malikoff. And it's the resolution authorizing execution of high school district, authorizing execution and delivery of the joint exercise of powers agreement with Santa Barbara Elementary School District, establishing the Santa Barbara Schools Financing Authority. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It passes 5-0.
Great. Legally, then, you now have, we will have the joint powers agreement executed. Once it's been approved by the board, which you just did, it legally exists. So we now have a joint powers authority in existence. Under the agreement, you are the board of directors of the newly formed Schools Financing Authority. And the next item on the agenda is resolution number 1. It's a housekeeping resolution. It takes care of a couple of necessary organizational matters. The first is the adoption of a conflict of interest code. We find it best, and it's generally the practice around the state, if you just adopt the conflict of interest code for one of the member districts.
Mr. Adams, I'm going to take a break from this meeting of the Santa Barbara School Board, and then when we will begin a meeting of the JPA.
Great.
So a break from our school board agenda, and now we will begin a consideration of JPA matters.
Thank you.
So you're
Okay.
convening us now as a different entity.
Correct.
Oh, Madam Chair,
Yes?
I have a question regarding JPA 3.
Okay.
I actually have a couple of
Okay.
them. One is that it notes on Article 1, Section 1.03, the last line of Section A, that the elementary school the president of the Board of Education of the high school district and the elementary school district shall serve ex officio as the chair of the board. Typically, as the board, the president is not ex officio. Isn't that correct? I mean,
It's entirely up to you. The alternative would be to elect a chair of the authority by separate action. We thought it was most expeditious just to have the,
Whoever was sitting as board president would also act as chair of the JPA.
it avoids an election. That's all it does.
Right.
okay, then I'm fine with that. And then the quorum, item C in that same section, under C, says the affirmative votes of at least a majority of the board members present at any meeting at which a quorum is present shall be required to take any action by the board. So our quorum is 3. Let's assume 3 members were present. It would take a vote of 2 to take action.
If there are 3 members and only 3 members there, you have a quorum. And that being the case, you'd need a majority of the group, which would be 2 members, to take action.
So I'm wondering, and I'm not sure if this is, this might be a question for Craig, actually, but in item E4, we are looking at board policy board bylaw 9323, and that says unless otherwise provided by law, affirmative votes by a majority of all of the membership of the board are required to approve any action under consideration, regardless of the number of members present.
I think this falls under the heading of unless otherwise provided by law.
You can
Okay.
do it, you can do it either way. The provision we have in here is the bare minimum legal requirement. If you're not legally required to have the provision that you just described, but you certainly can if you want to make it consistent with your board policies.
I was just wondering if there was going to be any problem with the fact that they weren't consistent.
No, it's a separate agency and it's governed
Okay.
by separate law.
Okay. And then I had one other.
Just let's stop right there, though. However, if board members are more comfortable with the JPA quorum and votes being in compliance with the board bylaws, you can specify that.
I don't have a preference.
Yeah, it doesn't make any difference to me either.
I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, people were clear.
And then the last thing is, I was wondering, because I see it throughout the document, and sometimes it seems superfluous, so I'm wondering if there's a legal reason why it needs to be there. The term "from time to time," does that have a legal meaning that it requires it to be there? Because it seems to me, I mean, looking at it purely from not a non-legal perspective, if we can do it from time to time, that means we can do it.
Means you can do it any time you want to.
So, do we need the words "from time to time," or do we just need to say we can do it?
There are probably a number of circumstances where it's unnecessarily used. It clarifies the intention that some action can be taken at any time, as opposed to like being a one-time action.
Ah, okay.
Legally, it does mean at any time and multiple times.
Okay. So it's better to leave it in.
Well, I can't tell you that they were all carefully thought through each time, but it does have a meaning that
Okay.
probably would be best left in place.
And then one just a real picky thing,
Sure.
and that is in D, that same section in item D. The first sentence is, "The board will hold regular meetings on at."
That is a typo. Very good. The word "on" should be removed, and I'll make sure that's in the copy that's presented to be signed.
Okay, thank you.
It's Dr. Noel?
I'm skimming through this I can't find any reference to the Brown Act. What, could you?
There
just missed that?
should be a reference. It's in section 103B.
103.
All meetings of the board, including without limitation, regular, adjourned, regular,
it
blah,
is.
blah, blah.
There
Shall
it
be
is.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
He lives and breathes. Okay, shall we proceed? Go ahead, Mr.
Okay.
Adams.
The first action, first of two resolutions that you have as the newly formed Board of Directors of the Financing Authority is the adoption of a conflict of interest code. We've drafted it such that it simply incorporates by reference the conflict of interest code that you've adopted as a school district. That way, if you make any amendments to the district conflict of interest code, they automatically track through to the Financing Authority and you don't have to do them multiple times. We recommend that. And the other significant item in this resolution is setting the time and place for regular meetings. You are required to have at least one regular scheduled annual meeting. Working with staff, we have identified in here the second meeting, second Tuesday in June, which corresponds to a regular scheduled board meeting. We said we put 6:45 in so that it would be in sync with your regular board meeting. Having said that, it can be anything you want it to be. That's right. It's intended to give you a short period. Now, the provision in the Joint Powers Agreement also says if there's no business to come before the board, you don't have to have a regular meeting, but you need to have one established.
So is it appropriate to make a motion to adopt resolution number 1,
Unless there's,
2006-07?
yes, unless there's further discussion.
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you. So Noel and Malakoff, resolution of the Board of Directors of the Santa Barbara Schools Financing Authority, approving a conflict of interest code and setting time and place for regular meetings of the board. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes 5-0. So we're on to JPA 5.
Okay. The next resolution is the reason we're here tonight, and that's the resolution that authorizes the issuance and sale of revenue bonds by the financing authority in the principal amount of not to exceed $40 million, and is for the purpose of doing three things: providing money to refund the elementary school's outstanding bonds, general obligation bonds, refund the outstanding high school district GO bonds, and lastly, putting the savings that result from those first two refundings into a project fund to be spent on projects for the benefit of the districts, they'd be spent in proportion to the savings that are generated from the elementary school district on the one hand and the high school district on the other. I would, at this point, like to request that you consider a revision to this resolution. The financial advisor on Monday recommended a change, and we've discussed it with your staff, and we think it's advisable. I have a replacement page if it's helpful to pass it out so you can see the.
Adams, are there also copies available in the back of the room for the public?
I think
Okay.
I brought 7 copies of it, so I'm not sure
Okay.
if. Oh, there we go. Okay. It's a minor change, and I always hate to have changes come up at the last minute because it tends to divert the discussion to the change rather than all the other provisions of the resolution. But the financial advisor, this resolution identifies the underwriter of the bonds and authorizes the bonds to be sold to that underwriter, and it's Prager, Seeley and Company, which is George Zeronian's firm, Joe Zeronian's firm, and. The financial advisor recommended that in order to preserve as much flexibility to get the best deal for the district, should something, and the bond market is very volatile, and they're concerned that it may be possible for a different underwriter maybe to provide some more savings through some creative structuring of the debt or some aggressive marketing of the bond. So he just asked that we preserve the flexibility to designate, by having the superintendent be authorized to designate a different underwriting firm should conditions make that in the best interest of the district.
And I think that's very wise.
I move to adopt resolution number 02, 2006-07 as amended on this supplement. I don't know how to label this, but the amended of section 3 as just explained and as appears on the supplement.
So a motion by Dr. Noel and a second by Ms. Malakoff to approve resolution number 02 of the Financing Authority with that amended section. It's section 3. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So passes 5-0.
That does conclude all the actions that we're presenting for your initial meeting as the Board of Directors of the Financing Authority.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Adams. That.
But we're
What-
not completely done.
Oh, no, I understand.
Okay.
Somebody turn the lights
Oh, sorry.
back up.
Do you need a motion to adjourn?
No. We're still continuing with this.
No, I mean to adjourn the Joint Powers.
Yes,
That's right.
Thank
That's
you.
right.
Go ahead.
I move to adjourn the meeting of the Joint Powers Authority.
Okay, so a motion by Dr. Noel, second by Ms. Malakoff to adjourn the meeting of the JPA. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. And now we are back as the Santa Barbara School Board, ready to complete our business
Great.
with this.
There are 2 resolutions left. One, as you're sitting as a board of the elementary school district, and the other in your capacity as board of the high school district. The elementary school district resolution authorizes the issuance and sale of not to exceed $15 million of refunding general obligation bonds to refund the 1998 Series A bonds to generate the savings that will be captured through this financing program. It's a fairly long resolution. It really is the about the same as a general obligation, a new money resolution would be. In this case, though, it's for refunding purposes.
I think it's, yes.
So it's
Are we looking at the?
It's labeled ESD 1, am I correct? It's resolution number 0506-39.
I don't have the resolution numbers, I'm afraid.
Okay.
What's it look like in
Well, we
here?
have a number of ESD ones.
I'm sorry.
It's this?
No.
Oh, there it is.
I think Mr. Hetyonk's
If
putting
you
it up
find
there.
it, you make a motion.
Yeah, right there.
There we go.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's seven.
I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on it. It essentially authorizes a new issue of general obligation bonds for the sole purpose of refunding the 1998 Series A bonds. It authorizes the sale of these bonds to the financing authority as part of the overall financing plan. It directs the county to levy a tax to repay these bonds. It sets up all the repayment funds. When these bonds are issued, the 1998 Series A bonds will no longer be outstanding and will be replaced by this issue.
Move to approve resolution number 0607-39.
Second?
Motion by Ms. Parker, second by Ms. Cordero. I just want to make sure we're all looking at the same document that's up on the screen. There were a lot of pieces of paper in here.
Yeah, there we go. Voila.
Okay, it's the resolution of the Board of Education of the Santa Barbara Elementary School District authorizing the issuance and sale of the 2007 general obligation refunding bonds in the maximum principal amount of $15 million to refund outstanding general obligation bonds, election 1998, Series A. So we're all there. And there's a motion on the table. Any discussion?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. So now we move on to the high school district resolution, which is 0607-38.
Move to approve?
Second.
So a motion by Ms. Cordero, a second by Ms. Parker. Resolution of the Board of Education of the Santa Barbara High School District authorizing the issuance and sale of 2007 general obligation refunding bonds in the maximum principal amount of $25 million to refund outstanding general obligation bonds 2000 election, 2000 election Series A. Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So that passes 5-0.
You're done with me.
We're completed. That's,
Think good thoughts about the bond market.
yeah, it hasn't been looking too good lately,
No.
but thank you. And
Thank
thank
you.
you for walking us through all of this business. Okay, so we are finished with item E2. We are on to item E3, which reads approval of revisions to management and confidential salaries, benefits, and working conditions for 0607 and 0708. And Dr. Robertson, it looks like you're taking it for Dr. Sarvis.
Tag I'm in. Yes. Recently, Dr. Sarpis has been in negotiations with the school board, and we asked that he wait till after everything else had been settled with the other two bargaining units. So what tonight has been presented to you is the proposed revisions to the original proposal that we submitted. And for the purposes of the audience out in the community, the proposed management salaries, benefits, and working conditions are as follows. Is that the salary increases for 2006, 2007 are retroactive 3% to July 1, 2006. For 2007, 2008, 3% increase effective July 1. That you upgrade the mileage allowance under Board Policy 4333 in keeping with the current IRS rates and effective upon adoption of the change in board policy. I will bring in updated language the next board meeting in regards to this. And the change in confidential vacation days to follow the current classified employee leave agreement as stated in the CSEA contract. Again, effective upon adoption of change in board policy. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the revisions to the management and confidential salary benefits and working conditions for 2006, 2007, 2007, 2008.
Thanks, Dr. Robertson. Any questions or comments by board members?
I have one quick question. For the 0607 retroactive back pay, will that be in the July 1st paycheck, or will that August 1st?
It's my understanding as of today that it's going to be a supplemental check coming out July 13th.
Happy day on July 13th. Any other questions or comments? Okay, is there a motion then?
Move to approve the revisions to management and confidential salaries, benefits, and working conditions for 2006, 2007, and 2007, 2008.
Second?
And it's worth noting that, that I believe that this was part of what was prospectively calculated in the budget for 0708. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we're on to item E4. The second reading and adoption of revised board bylaw 9323, meeting conduct. And we've seen this one on a number of occasions.
This is the second reading now. In the course of updating all of these board policies and regulations in the 1000 series on community relations, it was determined that there was significant overlap in BP 1120 board meeting procedures and the recently adopted board bylaw 9323 meeting conduct. So the plan here in front of the board is that board policy 1120 will be eliminated and that information from that policy has been added to the bylaw 9323 meeting conduct. And the recommendation is to adopt.
Makes sense. Thank you. Any questions or comments by board members?
I just have one little correction. On page 2 of 5, the third paragraph under public participation, it's the second sentence says, to facilitate public participation, efforts shall be made, and I think we left out the word to.
Oh, that's why we keep English instructors around, for their editorial skills. 2. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Yes,
Question.
Dr. Noel?
Yeah, I'm looking at these rate structures on the Civic Center Act.
I think you're a step ahead of us.
Am I too?
Yeah.
Well, I thought I had.
Okay. So this is,
Oh, that's in E5.
right,
I lost my divider.
there's the segue to that board policy 1120, which is being eliminated.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about a second reading and adoption of revised board bylaw 9323 on meeting conduct. Is there a motion?
Move to approve board bylaw 9323.
Second?
Thank you. So motion by Cordero, second by Parker. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So it passes 5-0. Now, E5. And why don't we take these in order? And I don't know if Mr. Zettel has some introductory comments. Okay, we've been hammering at these for a bit.
Before we look at the policies, can I just point out that there are some misspellings on the list of co-sponsors and partners?
Okay. Why don't you take us through that?
I think this is a misspelling. I'm not positive of the name, but it says the Santa Barbara Lawn Bowls Club.
Okay.
I assume that means lawn bowlers or lawn bowling.
I think it means bowls.
Bowls? Lawn bowls? Okay, it may be.
I'm not sure, but I think so.
I'm not sure, so I just want to double check on that. And Casa de la Raza, Raza is misspelled.
Ah, you're right. Z. Thank you.
Can I ask about this list here?
Certainly.
That we asked for this because we were interested in handouts? Is that what that was about?
That's
And-
directly related to that, yes.
And it was also in terms of our facility use, or was it just the handouts?
I think this was related specifically to Board Policy 1325, advertising and promotion and the distribution of flyers. And Ms. Kiani is nodding yes. That's exactly what it relates to.
Was the question, do
This
we have
list
to
was
decide this in terms of which
No,
ones?
these
or
are the ones
these
who
are
we
the
have
ones.
existing relationships with.
This was the list that was provided by Parks and Recreation as to who their partners are and co-sponsors are. We didn't realize they had that distinction. It was, the information was gathered as a result of the questions that came from the board during the first reading. So this was a copy and paste off of what they sent us.
So this means that that any group on these lists could send a flyer to students in
Not at this time. At this time, the flyers have been distributed on about Parks and Recs programs held on district sites involving district children. So what came out of the last board meeting was who are Parks and Recs partners. That's why we wanted to provide you with this information.
So we could expand the flyers to these groups.
I would assume so, but I would suggest that legal counsel be involved in this because there may be some question of if we broaden the scope of partners, does this mean we have to be inclusive? That was part of what happened during the 2002, I believe, debate on flyers.
So we'll talk about this when we get to 1325?
Right, and actually, my preference would be to hold back on approving that portion or the entire group of policies tonight, because I had a number of questions about that and whether or not that was considered expanding the limited forum such to the point that it was no longer a limited forum. So I feel like I need clarification on those issues.
Also, is there not some screening that has to be done?
Presumably Park and Rec is doing that.
But we're liable.
That's exactly right. So there are some questions I think that need to be
So
clarified.
any kind of a blanket incorporation of someone's list really entails explicating that list and applying criteria apply to us.
Well, and see who the liability accrues to, yeah, okay. Okay, well, let's begin with Board Policy 1000. And then we can, if we come back at this a second time, we'll have clarified exactly what the issues are. Board Policy 1000, concepts and roles. No comments? Okay.
Sorry, I just had one question, and that
Okay.
is on the second paragraph, the very last sentence. It's listing county and agency, city and county agencies and organizations to promote and facilitate coordinated services for children. And I was wondering if sometimes do we also engage in programs or partnership in programs that support families, not
Actually-
just specifically the children?
Sure, CBET programs, Healthy Start.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure.
So I was
whether-
wondering if we could add families to that category, or if that makes it too broad. I'm not sure who to direct this question to. For coordinated services for children and families?
Well, let's prospectively add it,
Okay.
and we can come back to it. Okay, thank you. No other comments, then Board Policy 1100, communications with the public. And I think that Ms. Cordero, at the last time we discussed this, you talked about under 1100, 1112, and 1113 efforts to provide translation, but I don't know how that's reflected in 1100.
Well, the the English and Spanish that was added there, I thought was,
Well, it says strive to keep the community informed in English and Spanish. Okay,
yeah. So I assumed that
covers the others.
included all the other
Okay.
ways in which we're communicating.
I would think so. Okay,
I have
yeah, which number?
1100.
Okay,
Superintendent or designee shall use all available means of communication to keep the public aware of the goals, programs, achievements, and needs of our schools. I think that there's an obligation on the part of the district and the board also to communicate with the public about problems in a proactive way particularly. For example, issues of solvency we've had come up. problems in our audits. Can-
Would that be
yeah,
needs?
Things of that kind.
Suggested language?
Well, and problems.
Oh,
Achievements
okay.
and problems. Achievements, needs, comma, and problems.
Okay.
Could we say in concerns?
Well, we could, but I would like to say problems because in my opinion, there have been some major problems that we've confronted in the last year. And when I read our website and the news items on our website and press releases and so on, I never see any mention of them. And then, so the public gets blindsided, so we come in with a $2.5 million budget cut. And hardly anyone at the meeting. It seems to me that if we had communicated to the public the full scope of our problems, we would have had greater participation. And also, to me, it's a moral issue.
Well, let's put it out there for consideration. Yeah, Ms. Parker?
I'm not sure that problems is the right word.
Yeah.
But I can't think of the right word. at this time.
Shortcomings.
Shortcomings.
Concerns.
Well, I'm not,
Concerns.
shortcomings assumes a
Challenge-
judgment on the problem.
Challenges.
No, challenges. I mean, I agree with Dr. Noel that it needs to be clear that there are negative things
Right.
going on. And concerns maybe is not strong enough, but I just feel like that there is some word out
Problems is
there that's.
negative?
Yes, problems are negative.
Well, I guess I'm
Yeah.
talking about negative.
Yeah, and
I'm talking
absolutely. I
about
think
problems.
we need to be clear about that, but
I mean, when we get an announcement at the end of a meeting that we have to cut $3.5 million from our budget, that's a problem.
Yeah.
We can think about it. As
we
I
need to
said,
think
there,
about that word.
okay. Okay, Board Policy 1112. Board Policy 1113.
Wait a minute, 1112.
Mm-hmm.
1112 on the back side. Media Communications Plan. In order to help develop strong relations with the media, the superintendent or designee shall develop a proactive media communications plan. The plan may include but not be limited to information related to district programs and needs, student awards, school accomplishments, and events of special interest. Again, no problems. In my opinion, a public school does not need a media communications plan at all. Certainly not a proactive one. I consider that pure public relations, and my philosophy on that is change the reality and the image will follow. So I question that whole section. Media communications plan down to crisis communications plan. I have no problem with crisis communication plan.
I have no comment. It would be nice to have more reporters. I mean, that would do a lot to communicate to the community.
But we have no control over that.
No, we have no control over that. That's absolutely correct.
So if such a plan is going to stay in there, I'd at least like to have the problems in there too.
Okay, well, something for our consideration when we come to a conclusion, which is not likely to be tonight. Board Policy 1113 and Administrative Regs 1113.
Well, where are we now?
Sorry, this is one where I would like to have us add that the web materials will, that we will attempt to have web materials in Spanish. Actually, I would prefer to not say attempt, but that we may need to say that.
Strive was used in the previous board
Yes.
policy.
I always like if we just say we will.
It requires a huge financial commitment, unfortunately.
I would like to maybe say we will whenever feasible.
Okay.
But I struggle with where to put it. I think it would be in the board policy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I assume, Ms. County, you're taking notes on all this. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Board Policy 1160, political processes.
I have a problem word responsibility in the first line. The Board of Education has a responsibility to actively advocate, I guess that's a split infinitive, isn't it? To advocate fiscal and public policy that supports the district's schools and the children in the community. I don't think it's a responsibility, and you know, I have recollections of reading the ed code that defines what boards do and their responsibilities, but I would suggest language something like, the Board of Education may find it in its interest, in the district's interests, to actively advocate. Difference between a moral statement and a more descriptive statement.
Okay.
Down farther on that page, as necessary, the superintendent or designee may draft legislative proposals which serve the district's interests. And I'd like to see some accountability to the board and the public before our superintendent becomes a lobbyist.
So what language would you want to attach to that?
As necessary and authorized by the board, the superintendent or designee.
Well, this is just, when it says drafting legislative proposals, that's just something that would come to the board for approval, correct?
Not by this language.
Or what does it mean by legislative proposals?
Means draft a piece of legislation, send it up to Pedro Nava, ask him to try to get it passed. I don't see anything in here that would loop that to the board and therefore to the public before it already becomes a de facto policy by virtue of his doing it. I'd just like to get the board, and always if the board's there, the public in the loop.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, if that's the intent, I would rather see it stated like that the superintendent, as necessary, the superintendent or designee may draft legislative proposals for the board,
Sure.
which serve the district interests.
Okay.
That's more parsimonious.
Okay. Any other comments on 1160? Board Policy 1220, Citizen Advisory Committees.
$12.20?
I think that you were not with us, Dr. Noel, when we went through this the first time.
Yeah.
So I want to wait to get your comments. yeah.
Well, I have one comment, but without studying this.
Okay.
That's always more fun that way. From the hip. I would love to see our district advisory committees, I'm thinking particularly of the bond advisory committee, follow the post-Prop 39 model rather than the pre-Prop 39 model. And the main implication of that is that the pre-Prop 39 model allows very heavy concentrations of staff and the post-Prop 39 model requires much more concentration of citizen participation. So the pre and post means that if you pass a bond after Prop 39, you have to do it the latter way. And we passed our bonds before Prop 39.
Well, and in fact, we passed that bond before Prop 39, and there was no requirement for any
that's right.
advisory committee at all.
No, I'm not.
No,
I'm
I
not-
understand.
I'm just saying, given the way history has evolved, that
Right.
I like the movement toward more citizen and public participation, and would love to see us move in that direction.
I think that would be an ideal. I think that as school year goes on every year with the bond committee, that parent and citizen participation is strong at the beginning of the year and then tends to dwindle. So I'd be fearful when we reach April or May that there might not even be a quorum for the meeting. Ms. Parker?
And this is kind of off agenda. I'm a little concerned about if we're talking about the Measure V committee in particular, but just in the sense that any citizens committee that was created by a vote because of you passed something in the past. I don't know that you could retroactively go and change that because it was set up in a certain way based on what was in the ballot.
Bylaws for that particular committee, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and certainly any future bond that was passed would have to follow the Proposition 39 rules as opposed to the Citizens Advisory Committee.
Well, I guess my suggestion is, this bond committee aside, which is.
It was
would
an
have to be
example, I
revi-
understand, yes.
Is that in general, that's the principle that I'd like to see follow would be to make sure we have more citizen participation than staff participation.
Okay, is there a way you would want to,
I don't have a
change-
nice, part. I could work on something.
well, we're definitely going to get this back again, Dr. Noel, so you could work on
Yeah,
something.
okay.
Okay. Board Policy 1240 and Administrative Regs 1240.
Which one's that now?
It's the very next one.
Okay.
I'm just going in order.
Yeah, okay.
It's volunteer assistance. And there was an issue raised at the last time we saw this about whether or not we need to be complying with any fingerprinting requirements.
I certainly have lots of concerns with the AR 1240. The first reading of this didn't have a lot of the specifics that have been put in for the second reading. And when it comes to volunteers in the classroom, it's something that a lot of elementary parents and elementary principals and teachers will have a lot of input that they'd like to give. So when it comes to this AR, I think that we need input from PTAs, PTOs, we need input from the police department, we need input from principals. So things like making everybody get a TB test when there are costs involved. It's about $50 for a TB test. I know that, and it's about roughly $50 or so for the fingerprinting. At the elementary level, what a big concern was that when we discussed this at our elementary parent meetings, was that this type of these types of regulations would mean that high-income parents would be able to participate in their children's classrooms and low-income parents would not. And so it's something that I really think that we need to discuss further before we make these changes. So my preference would be that we hold off on this AR altogether until we talk about it further and include the community in it.
Okay. Yeah. So you're talking site council and PTA and/or foundation and/or PTO.
And police, because I think that they, in terms of the fingerprinting, they could have insight about whether, how much safety fingerprinting actually provides.
Right.
And I'm sure there are other people that I'm forgetting out there.
DLAC and ELAC, maybe.
Right. We had quite an extensive discussion during the Elementary Parent Advisory Council, like year before last, at the end of the year, and there wasn't any resolution really to it. So it's kind of an ongoing discussion and a challenge because of the cost.
Okay. Thank you. Now we're Board Policy 1250 and Administrative Regs 1250, visitors and outsiders.
I just had a question about the provision that all visitors shall register immediately upon entering any school building or grounds when school is in session. And I was wondering, and Mr. Zettel and Ms. Waske, maybe you can answer this, how is this enforced? Because my experience on the campuses is that it seems to be enforced very differently on different campuses.
Well, it's signed that all visitors shall report to the main office and state their business there. The actual enforcement of it is difficult when we don't have any kind of identifying badges or, identification of who the adult staff people are or who the children are that are actually in attendance at the school site. So we, hopefully that we have people out and about that notice strangers and direct them to the office. But it's a difficult piece when you have especially on secondary campuses with so many students and adults. Sometimes difficult to pick that up.
And
So it's an issue.
at the elementary level, in the offices, there's usually a little basket or an area that has a badge. A lot of them are apples that say visitor on them. And, I mean, it's usually the office is close to the front, not all cases. So it's in those cases where it's not, you have to be really diligent and remind staff all the time to ask people to go to the office, please, and get a visitor's pass.
But this makes it clear that parents and guardians are not visitors. So presumably a staff member could question a stranger, but if they said, I'm little Johnny's mommy, I'm going to his classroom, she could go straight to the classroom rather than going in and signing in the office?
You know, practice in most schools is that the principal or someone in the office accompanies a parent, or the child is brought to the office. You know, I mean, I can't say 100% that happens, but that's the expected practice, is that the child is brought to the office or someone accompanies the parent.
Well, I'm actually thinking of cases where you're going to volunteer in the classroom.
Oh, that's
So you're
different.
there once a week or whatever, and you go in and, would you go straight to the classroom at 10 a.m. or do you need to go to your office?
I would
This
say,
makes it, this sounds like they could just go straight to the classroom.
so, yeah, so
but-
we need to change this then because the expectation would be you go to the office, you get sometimes there's a volunteer tag as well, or a, stick-on kind of name tag.
They taught us in the infantry a long time ago that it all depends on the situation and the terrain. Santa Barbara High School would be is very difficult.
I think on most elementary campuses, you recognize the faces after a fairly short period of time, and you're right. You see a face you don't recognize, and you might be much more likely to stop them. But, okay. Okay. Board Policy 1260, Educational Foundation, and the question was raised the last time, does this policy prevent in-house fundraising, in other words, by the site itself? And I don't know if Mr. Price had an opportunity to look at it. I mean, from my perspective, it doesn't specifically exclude it.
I would suggest a little language change here, which is the board therefore approves and encourages the creation of an independent educational foundation. How about just making it of independent educational foundations, plural? And then in the next paragraph, it would be the board desires to work cooperatively with any foundation in determining the purposes for which funds may be used to meet the changing needs of the district and its students.
Okay. Well, it certainly reflects current practice. I mean, there is the Santa Barbara Educational Foundation, but a number of schools have started their own educational foundations as well.
I want to ask a question about that. Are those foundations completely independent of the school district?
Yes.
I can answer that.
Yeah, they're nonprofit. Oh, go
They're
ahead.
separate 501c3s, nonprofit organizations, so they have their own board and they answer to their own board.
But they must state a purpose in that legal document, and their stated purpose is to, raise funds and support programs for those
Yeah.
particular schools.
Well, the reason I ask is because I've had some parents talk about problems that district, well, for a high school foundation, for the high school in general, would then tend to compete with specific foundations that are already in existence or hope to become active for programs at the high school. No, I mean, the assumption is that there's a finite amount of money out there, more or less, and that then we create a competitive environment unchecked, or we don't create it. But even like if a high school wants to create or have its own foundation, that has nothing to do with the Board of Education. I would think that if the principal is actively involved, that we would have something to say about it.
I think up to this point, the high schools have been functioning through their PTAs for over, school-wide
Well,
fundraising,
recently,
although it competes
at
with.
least Santa Barbara, I had talked about raising $100,000. I presumed that was through a foundation of some kind, and
I have no idea.
I don't know. Mr. Turnbull? I would appreciate more information about this.
I just want to, before we address it, I just want to make sure we're talking about the policy. Is that how, in terms of what language in the policy are we addressing? Are we addressing the question of whether to make it plural?
I think what Dr. Noel is doing is exploring a particular instance and seeing how it relates to how the policy is worded.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I like Mrs. Parker's suggestions very much. Yeah, oh yeah, but I also see the potential for
Yeah.
a little chaos there, and wanted to understand more about it, and particularly the extent to which we are involved, or is this simply something that is in the private sector out of our hands?
Well, any nonprofit operating on its own is out of your hands. So, I mean, that's life, I suppose, on the ground. The issue that you have currently is twofold. One, there are existing foundations on campuses already. Santa Barbara High School, for example, has a foundation for the Multimedia Arts and Design Academy, the Visual Arts and Design Academy, the Theater Arts Foundation, an Athletics Foundation, I believe, is being incorporated as we speak. I believe there's another one I may not even know about. So this has been going on unchecked, to use your word, for quite some time. That's one example of one school. There are other schools, similar situations.
Is there a school-wide foundation?
There is a school-wide foundation that will be incorporated probably within a month. Yes. And the idea of that is to get away, and this is I said twofold, this is the other side. The idea is to get away from the idea that there is a finite amount of money, and that frankly, when it comes to fundraising, you have 5% of families who are tapped 5 times each by different groups who do not communicate with each other. That's part of the issue. That drives families away, and it drives them away from the fact that when you're raising funds right now, the foundations that are raising funds for demographics of the school that are not generally representative of the entire population. I'm putting that as politely as I can put it. This particular foundation of which you speak, the Santa Barbara High School Education Foundation, is purposely incorporating every member or a member of each one of those other foundations into its board to increase communication among the entire group, and its mission is to raise funds for the general program. So to use the words of Mad Academy representative who sits on the board of the Mad Academy Foundation, he knows several people who would give to the Mad Academy and is happy to speak to those people in his capacity as the board member there. He also knows many people who would not give to the Mad Academy because it's too finite, it's too myopic, and he would rather speak to those people about lifting the general program itself. That's what that foundation is about, and that's why there are multiple entities on that board.
Are these foundations, do they use school facilities and use school contacts and mailing lists?
Now I'm concerned that we are stepping away from the agenda item, and I'm wondering if we should bring back your concerns as a separate agenda item, Dr. Noel.
Well, it seems to me this concern fits under what's called educational foundations, and that's a board policy, and
But I think
that's a pretty generic description.
I guess I feel like we've stepped beyond using an example to discuss the prospective policy in front of us to getting into in-depth what goes on particular school sites, and I'm happy to defer to my fellow board members.
Madam President, I would like to know whether with this arrangement for nonprofit independent foundations at our high schools is in some way involving the district, either implicitly or explicitly, which has all kinds of legal implications. And it may be that because it is not an arm's length relationship, and I don't know that, that's why I was asking, that there may be legal exposure on the part of the district for the actions of these foundations. And it seems to me that's all perfectly legitimate topic under the rubric here of educational foundations.
Well, I was just going to say, I think I agree with Ms. Harder that we're kind of moving away from the policy, because the policy, if we are concerned about how the policy is implemented, the question is whether we want to have a policy that encourages education foundations. If we do, we can write ARs for how the policy can be implemented and how it should not be implemented and what the regulations and restrictions are on it. If we are going to have, if we do want to have, which I think is an entirely separate agenda item, a discussion of the existing foundations, then I think it's highly unfair to single out one school. I would prefer to have all of the schools represented who have any foundations connected to them to address the questions of how it exists on all the campuses.
Ms. Parker, and then Mr. Zettel, I'm sorry.
I think that maybe just in looking at the board policy, that what we need to make clear is foundations, nonprofit foundations can incorporate themselves and they can have whatever mission that they want to have, but our board can always refuse to accept a gift or a donation or whatever that, and maybe that needs to be more explicit in our board policy, that the board always reserves the right to accept or deny.
I think that misses the point that whether the board is even aware that the foundation exists, and therefore I think we are getting into a discussion of administrative regs.
Okay.
Well, I have some
Yeah.
language here, right under the board desires to work cooperatively in determining the purposes for which funds may be used. Foundations that operating on and involving school personnel, or operating on campuses and involving school personnel, shall be, let's put it this way, shall include on their board a member of the Board of Education. Well, that is certainly a germane point given this discussion.
If the high schools have, if the other high schools have as many foundations as Mr. Turnbull outlined for Santa Barbara High School, I'm wondering, Dr. Noel, how many of these boards do you want to sit on?
And I'm also wondering, because this talks about independent educational foundations, really you could be including your PTAs and PTOs in there as well. They do fundraising for us, so I think that we need to be careful about that.
Well, I think we need to be careful about it, and I'm just proposing some language for purposes of discussion, and that's my point, to get the discussion going.
I guess I get back to the fact that what we're really talking about are proposing some new administrative regulations. So I guess I would like to bring this item back separately on a future agenda.
I'm sorry, I guess I missed something. I was talking about the board policy 1260.
Okay, and
She's
Not
saying
A-
that we need to
not
create,
AR.
she's saying we need to create ARs.
Mr. Zettel, I'm sorry.
Well, I just had one comment going along with Mrs. Parker's comments, that the only point of contact is actually when funds cross over to the district from a foundation. They pass in front of the board as donations. And while we do work cooperatively with the foundations to identify accounts that these donations should be placed in and for various uses, and we try to make that clear to the board, that really is the only context that we have with these foundations, is when the money crosses over to us, if we accept it.
And I certainly hope that any member of the public watching this doesn't get the impression that we're not anxious to have people donating to our schools, because we certainly don't have a problem of too many people giving us money. So I hope that people understand that we want these organizations and these nonprofits to work with us and provide contributions for our students.
Absolutely. But if we're talking about the how, then I think we're talking about administrative regulations. And that was the direction of this conversation. So I suggest that we come back to this discussion as a separate item. Thanks, Mr. Turnbull. Board Policy 1321 and Administrative Regulations 1321, solicitation of funds from and by students. Yeah, Ms. Cordero?
I just wanted to see something somewhere, whether it's in the policy or in the ARs, indicating that this information is given to parents in writing. Because it states that, let me clarify the part that I'm specifically talking about. It says, at the beginning of each school year, the principal shall review with all staff and co-curricular and extracurricular organizers that public schools cannot charge fees for elective or compulsory classes. School administrators should be prepared to ask school staff and co-curricular and extracurricular activity organizers for an accounting of students' ability to participate in school-related activities if they are unable to help defray the activity costs. And later, it says parents and members of the community should not be unduly pressured to contribute to the school system or charitable organizations. Staff is expected to emphasize the fact that donations are always voluntary. I would really like to see something that says parents are going to get this information in writing, because I have heard from a number of parents who have felt that they were being told that they must do X amount of fundraising in order for their child to participate.
Well, the regs say no student shall be required. I mean, it doesn't get any more specific than that. But I'm not sure that there's not something that doesn't go out.
Well,
the whole sheaf of registration papers at the beginning of the year,
Yeah.
and I think
and maybe there is. I would just like to see it identified in the policy or in the AR that says that we're going to do that.
It might be nice for the district to develop a standard sheet that any coach or any club leader or whatever passes out with the packet that they hand to the student for that particular activity. So, and I don't know if that might need to be an AR as a board, part of the AR as opposed to board policy. But I would also like this board policy to be a little bit more explicit, because when it talks about that public schools cannot charge fees for elective or compulsory classes, it needs to be clear that that's for anything that's going on after school as well. And so elective, compulsory, and extracurricular. It is mentioned that they're going to talk to the extracurricular organizers, but I would like the word extracurricular in there as well.
Okay. Or co-curricular.
I think the parents might understand extracurricular.
Well, it says both in the
Yeah,
next line, so it could be
extracurricular and
included. Okay.
co-curricular.
Okay. Okay. So that's Board Policy 1321 and AR 1321, and the suggestion is that there be something that goes home to parents that would be reflected in the administrative regulations.
And I do think it would be better that instead of that big packet that you get at the beginning of the year, that it's when a band director or a coach hands out, you know, this is what your student needs to do for this class, that there's also a separate sheet from the district
In
that
an
says.
ideal world, the
Yeah.
board would be telling people how to do that, but in a not ideal world with 23 schools, I think
Yeah.
maybe we need to
Yeah.
leave that up to the school sites, how to best deliver that. Yeah. Board Policy 1325, advertising and promotion. And this was the issue that we had with regard to the Park and Rec sponsors
Yes.
and that sort of thing. So I think we need some information from Mr. Price on what that means to the limited forum, what the impact is.
Just one thing I have to add on that to think about for Mr. Price and for us is that even without changing it so that it's more than just Parks and Rec in the city, that where it says flyer content must be focused on the Joint Use Partners Program for Youth Conduct on district campuses for district students. I would like to see on district campuses be eliminated, whether or not it's for just the city or some of the city's partners, but focused on the Joint Use Partners Program for Youth Conduct for district students. So in case they're doing something that's at a park, that our students can be notified of it.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And then Board Policy 1330, I think there were a number of board members who wanted to comment on this. Use of school facilities. And then there's a new fee schedule that's part of that. Yeah, Dr. Noel.
I had a question about, on 3 of 7, the inset top paragraph at the top of the page about liability. Any school district authorizing the use of school facilities or grounds under supervision, A shall be, under subdivision A, pardon me, shall be liable for any injuries resulting from the negligence of the district in the ownership and maintenance of those facilities or grounds. Then it goes on to say the same thing about the user, and that the district and the groups shall each bear the cost of insuring against its receptive risks. It doesn't talk about the amount. And I know I have used, on behalf of a lacrosse club, rented the La Cumbre field, and I think we had to have $1 million, something like that. Is that, well, the reason I raise that question is because we have swimming pools. And because there was a recent tragedy at a local swim or a club that at least some people think is going to could involve substantially more money than $1 million, and indeed permanent injury, brain damage injuries that could happen. Could count into the 10s to 20s or higher than that in millions. You know, sooner or later, the institution with the deep pockets, I know ours aren't very deep, but the institution ultimately is liable. So I worry about this paragraph, because it first of all, it declares the liability, but it doesn't deal with the question of what happens when you start pushing the limits of the amount of money. And I don't know the answer to that, but it's very troubling.
If I may address the board, Dr. Hart, or Mrs. Harder. Dr. Noel, on our Civic Center application form, require $1 million liability for everything except pool usage. Pool usage is $5 million.
I guess what Dr. Noel was asking was whether we should be including some specified amount in the board policy. And I guess that would really be a question for Mr. Price.
Yeah, because,
Okay.
because what's stated here is directly out of the education code.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
And in that, I think it would be helpful to get an idea of what some historic cases have involved financially. Maybe 5 is enough. Of course, these are things where the probability may be low, but the consequence is catastrophic. And you know, rational decision theory says cover yourself on those kinds of cases.
We can also contact Keenan and Associates, our insurance carrier, for some guidance.
I think that would be very helpful.
Other board comments on this section? Ms. Cordero?
Yes, I had a question about, on AR 1330, number 6, under Civic Center use, where it says, supervised recreational activities, including but not limited to sports leagues activities that are arranged for and supervised by entities, including religious organizations or churches, and in which youths may participate regardless of religious belief or denomination. And I'm wondering if we could also include other protected classes there, besides just religion.
I think religion's in the law, isn't it? Specified in
Well,
the
there,
Civic Center Act?
well, protected classes means it's in the law too, so
The
that's what I'm
the
asking.
application itself does state that. But if you wanted to add something to the AR, we could do that.
I would, I mean, if,
A general non-discrimination clause?
Yeah, there
yeah,
would be no
because it seems
reason
like
not
we're
to include
singling
it.
out one protected group and leaving out all the other protected groups.
And if it's reflected in one document, it might as well be reflected in the other.
I'm simply saying, Mrs. Cordero, that I can see why they put that one in there and maybe left the others out, because I recall reading religious groups explicitly singled out. But I could be wrong about that, but you're right. I think that there should be a generic.
We can easily do that.
Then Item number 9, it's probably, I think I have a issue. I'm assuming that the document cited in the parenthetical citation there, Military and Veterans Code, probably has some fairly specific definitions, but I'm wondering how we determine what constitutes a patriotic celebration, and would Veterans for Peace also qualify as a veterans organization?
If Veterans for Peace did not qualify as that type of organization, they would still qualify for Civic Center use. So what we're doing here is naming some of the specific uses as outlined in the Education Code. It by no means precludes any other use. In fact, almost any use which doesn't violate board policy, law, or create a riot is basically allowed.
How about some language like including but not limited to?
As far as
When you do these kinds of exemplary lists.
Like veterans organizations means, unless, I'm wondering if the military code specifically identifies the organizations.
oh, okay, I see.
Or if other organizations that are also relevant to veterans could be included.
I sort of feel like number 1 on that list is so
I think
inclusive.
number 1 and number 2 includes just about everybody, and the rest are just meant to repeat what is specifically stated in the Education Code under the Civic Center Act.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Any other questions on that section? Dr. Noel?
I'm puzzled. I understand direct costs for uses that don't make money. And I understand fair market value for uses that do make money that is not going to be given for charitable or purposes. Then I look at the part that you've lined out, which includes the cost schedules for the various facilities, auditoriums, gymnasiums, tracks, swimming pools, and so on, cafeterias. And then I look at the new schedule, and most of them, the price has gone down, which presumably, since the price is connected to some kind of a cost accounting that has arrived at direct costs, means that prices are going down in the maintenance of facilities. And I since that to me is counterintuitive in 2007, I'd like to understand that better.
let me back up to explain a little bit about some of the problems we've had in the past, and I think your comment earlier about chaos is what led us to this. It's been a nightmare administering the current board policy and regulations under Civic Center use. Trying to find out who's a nonprofit, who's not with their paperwork, who's making money, who's charging admission, who's charging to belong to an organization, what principal has promised somebody free use when the board policy says they don't get free use, and then trying to, and then having to get legal counsel involved with their legal counsel is an expense. A lot of ill feeling, and a lot of who's going to check to see what the proceeds are used for, who's checking the books of these individuals. Had a short discussion last time before the board, and I'm sorry you weren't here, Dr. Noel, so some of this is a little bit new, but the policy change would be under fees on page 1 of 2. Basically, the board believes the use of school facilities or grounds should not result in cost to the district. What we've done is we've gone through the fee schedule and say, okay, if we charge everybody, let's make it a little bit more amenable and a little bit more cost-effective to a group, whether they be a nonprofit or not, that's doing something as recreation for our students. So we took some key areas that are typically used and reduced that fee where everybody would pay that fee. There would be no more free use except for the short list that's given at the beginning, which means we reduced a generic classroom. We reduced a play field outdoors. We reduced an outdoor basketball court. We looked at swimming pools. We looked at some of the places that get heavy recreational use and charge a small fee to everybody rather than giving everybody free use at the expense of the district's general budget. So no, sir, facility costs have not gone down and the upkeep of facilities has not gone down. But this was a way to equitably charge and administer a fair civic center policy that doesn't create hours and hours upon administrative time, assessing fees, checking on organizations, and resolving instances of ill will between users in the district because of misconception about who gets charged what.
You're in a real dilemma.
Yes.
Because
a lot of staff time.
Because the law requires you to make the distinction between the users, and it requires you to have an underlying cost basis for the fees, and yet I sure hear your argument that administratively it becomes very difficult.
Well, the board has the authority to say we're going to charge some people or we're going to charge everybody. And what I've done at the beginning of this is under free use on page 3 of 7, cut that list down. That list now is your employee organizations, organizations covered under memorandums of understanding or joint use, a government agency for a special meeting or polling for voting, board-approved fundraisers, because if you approve an organization to fundraise, we should help them out and not charge them if you've approved the fundraiser. Our organizations and alumni associations, if they're going to have a meeting, and based on a previous discussion, maybe we want to put the word educational foundations in here someplace. Do you want to charge an educational foundation if they meet in a conference room at a high school? Basically, for this free use, we've said here that we will not charge an application fee of $25, but we will charge any custodial fees. In other words, if a custodian has to be there to open up or clean up, and the school submits overtime for that purpose, even though they get free use, they should pay for that custodial fee.
A direct cost.
Right, direct cost. And so basically what I've done with the fee schedule is go through, I've looked at what other districts are doing. Per Dr. Malikoff's suggestion, we looked at how some of them charge for recreational activities like Little League or other leagues. They charge a nominal fee per team, per season. It eliminates a lot of paperwork. It covers basically the cost of maintaining the facility they use. Currently, you have an elementary basketball league that may be using a multi-purpose room at an elementary school. There's wear and tear on the floor. There's power, electricity. Our power bill's over $1 million a year. So it's just an attempt to collect some money to help offset these costs. But in order to make it fair, and in light of recent happenings around town, you want to make it fairly reasonable for everybody to access the school. Does $10 an hour for a fee for a generic classroom recoup costs? No. But I think it's fair to charge that to encourage after-school activities.
I'm sorry, I have one thought that came back to me, a swimming pool thought. Do we have a screening, the users have to provide, we're talking about off-campus users, right? They have to provide for lifeguards.
Correct.
Do we have an approval process of the qualifications of lifeguards?
They have to submit who the certified lifeguards are with their Civic Center application, and that they have their certification.
Okay. We don't do anything in addition to that?
No.
Okay, thank you.
They submit that with their application. And like on the pools, I was trying to be fair. Currently, we charge $25 an hour for pools for use of chemicals and water and everything else. So what I went through is, okay, we have 3 different size pool. We'll charge $1 per hour per every meter, now that we have 3 different size pools that we use. And I also put in there that if 2 users are using the same facility, they split the cost. If you have a facility like Dos Pueblos High School could easily have 2 nonprofit or for-profit or 2 groups using that pool at the same time for water polo practice. You don't want to preclude one from using it while the other's there. You don't want to charge both of them the use of the full 50 meters, so it gives a chance for a little bit of flexibility, but yet for the district to collect fees to offset its costs. So are we collecting 100% of what it costs us? No. Are we providing a venue for the community for recreation with a minimum effect to the district's general fund? I believe we are. And I believe we're hopefully, I think it's a good policy, but I'll leave that to the 5 of you to let me know.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are we now competitive with Hope and Goleta?
We are competitive now with other elementary districts that we have gotten more use because we're cheaper.
Interesting. Ms. Cordero?
I just want to say that I think the philosophy of trying to create a policy that promotes use by organizations, especially those that are providing activities for young people who are likely in our district, but even for those who aren't, is commendable. I'm really happy that that's been the direction that you've taken with this. I think for a variety of reasons, not the least of which are some of the tragedies we've seen recently, but just in general, I think a school district ought to be supporting the recreational activities of young people. So I really appreciate that you've taken that position.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Haydock. Any other comments or questions on this section? We're going to spend about 4 more minutes on this. Board Policy 1340, access to district records. And there's an administrative reg that goes along with it. And my only comment is that both the policy and the records should reflect that if there's a retrieval fee for documents that are stored, that the requester of the documents be paying that retrieval fee. We talked about it the last time, yeah. Okay. Any other comments? Okay, Board Policy 1400, relations between other governmental agencies and the schools. Comments? Okay. Board Policy 1431, waivers. Okay. Board Policy 1700, relations between private industry and the schools. Oh, we're finishing 4 minutes ahead of schedule. This is impressive.
Good job.
No, we had a lot of extra time to deal with it, or I would have been cutting off the discussion. So we will see these again at a future meeting, and then we also have a related separate discussion as to the any administrative regulations connected to educational foundations. Okay, so we will take a break, 10 to 15 minutes. Let's say 10. Okay. Okay, we are on to item E6, second reading and adoption of revision of Board Bylaw 9250, remuneration, reimbursement, and other benefits. Any comments or questions on this item? We've had a number of opportunities to discuss it. If there's no discussion,
Well,
is somebody prepared to make a motion?
I just wanted to reiterate my opposition to this. Again, pointing out that for board members for individuals who might wish to run for the board, if they were to utilize the board's access to health benefits, it would actually cost them money to serve on the board, which to me is the best way to deter working class community members from being able to serve on this board.
Assuming, of course, they took health benefits, as I think I am the only board member who uses the health benefits right now.
Certainly, but those in the working class would probably be more likely to need them.
I think the workload, the long hours, the stacks of documents like this are pretty big deterrents, but most importantly, the cost of getting elected, especially if you don't have labor union support, which is worth a few $1,000. These are big deterrents.
Then perhaps we should be in a different discussion at a different time, looking at some kind of campaign cost containment. So I'll throw that out there. But in any case, what we are dealing with today is very different. Is there a motion?
Move to adopt the revision of Board Bylaw 9250, remuneration, reimbursement, and other benefits.
Second.
Okay, there's further discussion? Motion by Ms. Parker.
It appears
second
that
by Dr. Nowell.
Mr. Diaz has something that he would like to add.
Would it be too much to ask the board to wait on this particular item until I present you the finished budget, to see just what the budget shows before we vote on this for yourselves? Is that appropriate?
Certainly, if the board wishes to wait and bring this item back, it's a quick item. We can wait and see what the budget discussion looks like and then bring it back at the July 10th meeting.
That's fine with me. I'm willing to withdraw my motion.
Is the seconder willing to?
I'm willing to withdraw my second.
Okay, then let's bring it back. Thanks, Mr. Diaz. Okay, item E7, board action on student expulsion case numbers. Let's begin with, out of order than what is on this sheet, 0607-78.
I move to uphold the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel in the case of 0607-78.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. In the case of 0607-81.
Move to approve the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 5-0. 0607-76.
Move to uphold the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of upholding the recommendation signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 5-0. Case number 0607-79.
Move to uphold the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So it carries 5-0. Case number 0607-39.
Move to approve the I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Move to approve the stipulated agreement.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the stipulated agreement signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay. Okay, so that was 4-1 with Dr. Noel voting no. Thank you, everyone. Now we're on to our conference agenda. F1, the first reading of Work Experience Education Plan and Revised Board Policy and Administrative Regulations 5113.2, Work Permits, and 6178.1, Work Experience Education. And Mr. Zettel.
Great, thank you very much. As part of the compliance monitoring process, the California Department of Education requires that districts or LEAs have a current and compliant work experience education plan. Our plan was last updated in 1986. And so we began the review process of our plan back in June of '06. It was reviewed, updated by a committee that represented our 3 high schools, including our high school principals, site work experience education coordinators, a rep from the special ed department, a LaQuesta counselor, John Baitner, and myself. We tabled those updates pending legislation of Senate Bill 406, because the implications of that Senate bill, as we looked at it, was that the issuance of work permits in the new legislation ties the ability of a student to get the work permit to grade point averages and attendance. And so at the, I guess the recommendation of our work experience education analyst, ledge analyst, we went ahead and put those pieces that were in the legislation into our plan. And so we are now compliant with SB 406. We also went ahead and amended the board policy and administrative regs to reflect those SB 406 regulations. No change in the fiscal impact of our work experience plan. I would like to note that during the summer, it's been just a delight because instead of the county office handling work permits, my office is doing that now, and Jerry and sometimes Teresa takes over that function, and it's been so fun to have the kids come in and you know, see them with their first work permits and what job are you getting, and it's been really a delight. So we do that during the summer. All of the career centers do that, and the work experience coordinators do that during the regular school year. Questions?
Yeah, Ms. Malkoff.
So this applies to La Cuesta as well?
Yes,
Okay.
all of our students.
I'm not even sure I understand that. Do all students who work need a work permit?
Yes, they do.
What
If
hap-
they're under between 16 and 18,
What happens if they don't get a work permit?
the employer is out of compliance with the law.
And it says that to get a work permit, you need a social security number.
You need identification, and we ask for two forms of identification: a social security number, a passport, a driver's license.
Does that mean a person who is not a legal citizen is not allowed a work permit?
If they don't have a legally, yes, they are not.
Interesting. Are we allowed to do that? How do I put that? Do something different for people who are legal citizens?
Not on the current form, no.
And
No,
no, I think the answer to that is no. If you are not a citizen or a resident alien and have some sort of other specified work permit, it's
We don't
against the
issue a
law to
work
issue
permit, no.
You have to have identification, right?
Yes,
If they move toward a driver's license, that would do it, right? That's
yes.
not the case
That's
now.
one form. We need two, yes.
Can I just ask a question? Does that have any effect on children who were born in the United States and are American citizens but were born to undocumented parents?
I would assume those children, being American citizens, could have a social security number, and that would be fine.
Okay, so there's no requirement, there's nothing that parents have to do that would require them to be,
Not at all.
okay.
A lot of parents come in with their kids, which is nice, so.
is there anything as to the job? Do we have any, I mean, some of this was about giving credit for work experience, is that right?
Yes.
But is there any limitations about the job itself?
Yes, there are limitations in the law, and I believe some of that is in the plan. They can't do, for example, dangerous work or work that puts them in any kind of jeopardy.
So we find out exactly what job they have and?
Yes, they have to tell us. The employer fills out the part of the form first, and then they bring it to us.
So they find the job first.
They
and
find
then
the
get-
job first,
and
their
then get
employer
the-
signs it off, and then they bring it to us for the final permit approval. Yes.
Do we operate any other programs that restrict, that exclude certain groups of students? I mean, this excludes any student who's not a legal citizen
From
or
working,
resident. From
yes,
from being in this program.
in the work experience program.
Do we operate any others?
Not to my knowledge. I don't believe there's any other programs like this that would exclude students.
Go ahead, Ms. Barr.
Can I ask, Senate Bill 406, has that passed?
Not yet.
Not yet.
It's pending.
But it has, is it controversial in any way? Is it something that is? you
Not
think will pass?
controversial at all.
Other questions? This is on the conference agenda, and the board may vote on an item from the conference agenda. And Mr. Zettel requested that since he will not, he's been seen this through from beginning to this point, whether the board might be interested in voting on it this evening or inclined to vote on it this evening before he finishes up his tenure with the Santa Barbara School Districts.
Thank you.
I would be certainly willing to make a motion in this case, since we aren't raising any specific questions about the language or wording or structure of these new policies and ARs. So I will make a motion that we approve the revised board policy and administrative regulations 5113.2 and 6178.1.
Is there a second? Okay. A second from Dr. Noel. So Parker and Noel, all those in favor of approving the revised board policy and administrative regulations regarding work permits and work experience education, signify by saying aye. Aye. And opposed?
No.
Okay, so that's 4-1.
Thank you.
So Mr. Zettel goes out with a bang. His work
With a
is
plan.
His work is done. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
Item F2, public hearing on the Santa Barbara Elementary and High School Districts updated and revised 5-year deferred maintenance plans. Mr. Hetyank, I think you've waited a while on this one.
Thank you, President Harder, members of the board. As I've indicated in the cover memorandum, annually I bring this plan to you prior to submission to the State Allocation Board. The plan is a 5-year plan. However, I update it every year. What that does is it allows us to give an accurate accounting to the State Allocation Board of what we spent in the current year to date. The current year is we're still in it until the end of this month. And then it also gives an opportunity for us to have met and got input from those people represented in the cover memorandum to develop the plan for the next fiscal year. And if you look at the plan, there's on page 3 of 3, basically before I can sign this, I have to say that the plan was discussed at a board meeting. And I'm happy to say that now we've discussed it. So unless you have any objections or additional discussion or questions, it's kind of a formality from this point.
Okay. Ms. Malkoff?
On the list of elementary schools that are on, I don't know what page this is, the 3, includes the Peabody charter, but does not include the other 2 charter schools. Is there
The
some?
other 2 charters are housed on other sites, so in other words, work that we do at the La Colina site would be for the whole La Colina site, and the same with Goleta Valley.
So
where
it gets,
Peabody is its own site.
so it gets paid for by the secondary districts
Deferred maintenance is
Deferred
part of the
Deferred maintenance
MOU.
part, yes.
as part of the secondary districts. Okay.
Yeah, the buildings, typically deferred maintenance is the buildings, and those buildings are owned by the secondary district, and they're responsible for maintaining them.
Okay.
Same thing with Cesar Chavez.
Did we, in terms of, it says current fiscal year, is that pretty much what the plan called for, is what actually happened?
No. We give our best guess. We don't know for sure sometimes when a roof is going to fail. A few board meetings ago approved a contract to fix a sewer line at La Cumbre. We had no idea that was going to break. So as things happen, we adjust to try and stay within budget. One of the things that we adjust a lot is our painting. We may not do a painting contract or two because some other unexpected things came up during the year.
Just one quick comment, and that is with the Department of General Services. Can we put them on notice that we have a different superintendent now?
Their paperwork, yes.
The paperwork doesn't reflect what you sent them. It's
And
certainly
some-
no fault of yours.
I
but-
still get some things with Dr. Caston's name on it
Okay,
also.
okay.
And we-
Quick question, though. You said that obviously jobs change, but the total amount of deferred maintenance for each district does not change?
Yeah, the amount that we received for the current fiscal year is indicated in the attachments, and then we have
Right.
to match that.
Right.
But we also have some carryover from previous years.
Okay. So there is some flexibility in that total.
So I try and be prudent and keep a healthy reserve for unknown things that could happen. So if a roof on a building failed and it wasn't budgeted and we had to replace it, that we were able to do so without having to affect other funds.
Thank you. Other questions? Pretty self-evident. Then we will see this the
I
next
just-
time
I-
around.
No, you won't see it again.
Oh.
This is it. You don't have to approve it, you just have
Thank
to
you. It's
discuss it.
just a public hearing. Thank you very much. Dr. Noel?
I just wondered why there's so much for paving.
Paving, we haven't done a lot of paving in the past few years.
$1.2 million.
For 1 year? Oh, for the whole thing?
Yeah.
Well, you've just awarded contracts in the last couple board meetings for redoing the paving at Peabody Charter School and La Colina Junior High School, the play areas. This is not parking lots. This is although parking lots would be under the same fund, but we've gone through, we've evaluated all the pavement in the district, we've established a priority list, and we're starting at the top of that list and working our way down. And this year, La Colina Junior High, the asphalt play area out between, back of the gym, if you've been out there, that's in pretty bad shape and got worse during construction, having contractors staging in that area. They're not now out of that area, time to fix it. The same with Peabody. A lot of that area was staging for contractors during their construction, and these were the two worst sites, and that's what we're attacking first. We also have some other sites that have some paving that requires rehabilitation, but we don't want to spend all our money in 1 year on paving. We also see a sizable number this year for painting. We have some buildings at Santa Barbara High School that we need to paint to protect.
So the $1.2 million in paving is not predominantly parking lots?
No, sir.
Thank you.
It may include some, but not predominantly, because the safety of children playing on the asphalt is a higher priority than parking a vehicle.
I'm glad to hear it.
Thanks, Mr. Hetjonk. So it's official. We had a public hearing
Thank you.
on the 5-year deferred maintenance plan. We are on to item F3, California School Employees Association tentative agreement for 0708. Ms. Alvarado.
Thank you, board members. This down. Pleased to present to you tonight as a conference item the 2007-2008 tentative agreement between the district and CSEA. As you can see, this is the first time in many years that we've completed negotiations well before the July 1 of year, and we'll review that tonight and then present it again on the June 29th board meeting for approval. Overall, Dr. Robertson and I, are as leader and lead negotiator, we're pleased of the collaborative work that we've done and the successful agreement with the classified bargaining team headed by CSEA President Brian Tangway, and as well as our district negotiations team. And just to review the tentative agreement very quickly, you have that before you. One of the reasons, or the main reason why we were so successful in completing this so early is that we have the Me Too clause as part of the agreement with the certificated employees this year. So we have finalized and just documented, putting in writing the 3% salary increase effective July 1, 2007. That was similar to the certificated staff. As you heard earlier tonight, the CSEA agreed to the health and welfare program as offered and recommended by Blue Shield, and offering the HMO 1 and 2 plans along with the catastrophic plan, changes into the PPO as far as grandfathering, vision, and the change to the prescription program. We've also added onto the agreement continued negotiations and discussions on promotions and hiring and formalizing and putting in language the process for promotions and hiring. That would mean hiring panels who's represented, the sites that are offered, the employees that are offered opportunities to be promoted in positions in the classified unit. Also note that CSEA, their bargaining team, ratified this agreement on June 13th. And again, I will be bringing this back on the June 29th meeting for approval. So if you have any questions on this agreement, I'm more than happy to answer those.
Questions for Ms. Alvarado?
If I remember, we negotiated separately the health and welfare benefits for the 2006 year, and I'm just curious how this compares with that.
The plans are as far as the premium costs?
Yes.
They're increased slightly by about the 5% increase that we've negotiated. So as far as HMO 1 plan, it's an increase of about $30 a month. The HMO 2 plan, it'll be about an increase of another $20 to $25 a month for the classified employees. PPO costs will remain the same for those that continue on that. And then, of course, we're going to offer the no-cost catastrophic plan. So the increases have been minimal, and another reason why CSEA was supportive of this program.
Thank you.
Other questions? No?
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now we're on to item F4, update on the 07-08 adopted budget and estimated actuals development. Mr. Diaz?
Yes, thank you, President Harder. This will be short and sweet. We are in the very final stages of review of the budget. As you may or may not be aware, we experienced considerable processing difficulties over the weekend with our system. We were all here and the computers were working away, but we lost a little time. So we are actually at the stage where we are reviewing that all revenues have been included but not overstated. All expenditures have been included but not understated. And that our multi-year projections reflect a realistic projection of future revenues and expenditures. This budget has to be accurate. It's my first budget presenting to you, to the board and the community. And we would just like to see this district break the cycle of these excruciating budget reductions. So it's just imperative that I bring you a good, sound budget that we're not going to have to stand up here in 4 months and say, oh, but I forgot that. So I appreciate the time, the patience, and I will be bringing you a budget for adoption this Friday.
Thanks, Mr. Diaz. And I just want to make it clear for members of the public that that meeting where the budget will be presented and adopted will be on Friday, July 1st. Thank you.
June 29th.
Thank you. I'm
5
jumping ahead of
p.m.
Thank you, at 5 p.m. So I just want to make that clear. Questions for Mr. Diaz with regard to progress? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the quick update. I appreciate it. We're on to item F5, report on Latino achievement. Were you not expecting us to get to you, Dr. Hayden?
That shocked look.
Was not expecting it. Okay, well, let's start with the report. Put it up. That's the one I wanted. Okay, so this is about Latino students in our district, so I'll just stay close to this guy. And just to start off with a little facts here, 70% of the elementary school district has Latino students, so quite a few. But then we go to secondary, it's only 46, and that's because our feeder districts have more white students instead of Latino students, and so that really brings the number down. In general, in the secondary district, it's about 46% Latino and about 46% white. and then the rest is other minorities. I'll give more details on the Latino students, and I will be comparing them mainly to white students because we don't have a large enough group of minorities in the other categories to make any comparison. In a few of the comparisons, there's not enough students in Latino students or other students to make any type of comparison, such as the continuation schools. So I'm really not including the continuation schools in this discussion right here, and Santa Barbara Charter. So we can go really quickly. That's the tables, so we'll just skip through that. This is the population of the elementary school district, and I think this is very important to look at. You can look at Cleveland over here. There's the white students at Cleveland. And you can see that we have a good number of schools here where they're almost all Latino students in them. The school that has the greatest proportion of non-Latino students is OAS. And you're going to see how that plays in some of the charts in the following. And then we have another 3 schools here that are pretty even, with Washington having the greatest number of non-Latino students, and then Roosevelt, and then Peabody. And you'll see these schools cropping up in interesting statistics later on too. So that's the overall.
Dr. Hayden?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Dr.
No,
Noel.
please, I'm sure you're going to ask the same question.
I wish you would define, not necessarily for board members, but for the public, what you mean by Latino, how they are identified.
They're identified in the student information system, and it's self-identified.
Thank you.
By the families. And when they fill in their, in the very beginning when they enter the school and the register, they have a home language survey they have to fill in, and that's where the primary information comes in. And so then we enter it into the student information system, however the parents filled it in.
Okay, so this category of Latino can include English language learners from homes that identify as Spanish speaking.
Absolutely.
And as well as someone who's a native Santa Barbaran for many generations with a Latino last name or a Hispanic surname.
As they self-identified.
Thank you.
And
okay.
you're absolutely right, but right now this is just Latino, and I haven't broken it up. You're going to see in a few minutes that it will make an important difference between English learners versus not all of the white population is not English learners.
Okay.
We have quite a few Russians and others that are also English learners that get thrown in here. Dr. Noel.
I don't see Santa Barbara, a charter school on there.
No, and that's one of the ones I couldn't put in here. One of the reasons why is that Santa Barbara Charter until this year was not in our student information system. They kept their own data. So with Aries, the purchase of Aries, we're pulling in Santa Barbara Charter into the student information system. Any other questions before we go on? Okay. Here's the middle schools, and once again, you'll see there's quite a bit of difference, but it's starting to even out a little bit. With La Cumbre, you can see the huge difference here. I believe La Cumbre's numbers are going up, though, and they're getting more balanced, if you wish to say that, in terms of Latino and others. And La Colina has the largest non-Latino population, but once again, it's quite a few Latino students there, 30.2%. Down here, by the way, are the total number of students in the school, so you can kind of gauge this a little bit. And then here is the high schools. And the high school, if I go back, these schools are already starting to get the outside districts dumped into the numbers. And that's why you see a much more even spread. And then by the time we get to the high schools, we really have a quite even spread of Latino and white students between all 3 of the high schools. DP, of course, having the greatest spread between Latino and whites. Okay, so here now we're looking at just Latino students. We're looking at 3 years, and we're looking at their English percent proficient. And you can see that OAS, once again, I talked about that, it only has 37 Latino students. and it has a high social economic status, higher social economic status. So what you're going to see is that they're doing the best in terms of percent proficient of Latinos. And then we have a nice distribution down here, all the way down to Cesar Chavez, which has a very low percent proficient. You can see that there's a general trend. It's actually a dispersion. We're getting a greater dispersion. So some schools are pulling their Latino students up, and other schools are kind of going sideways. And we're getting a greater spread here. A general trend up in terms of percent proficient across the elementary district. Yes, Dr. Noel.
Well, Santa Barbara Charter is not going sideways.
I have Santa Barbara Charter here because we can pull that, and Santa Barbara Charter went up and went down. The school that shows the greatest growth, by the way, or some of the interesting growth, is that we can see that Roosevelt and Washington are here, and in Santa Barbara, that's actually Santa Barbara Community Academy. And Cleveland is an interesting one to look at, because
Right.
Cleveland is doing quite well, even though if you go to this chart up here, it's got the highest minority percentage. But go ahead, Dr. Noel.
No, I agree. Cleveland is really very impressive.
That's right there.
Cesar Chavez at the very bottom.
Here.
Santa Barbara Charter, the number 26 afterward is what?
A number of Latino students.
Okay.
So this is Santa Barbara Charter here.
Okay.
And this light is going
So
out.
it doesn't. Santa
Battery must be going dead on this. Go ahead.
Is there any indication, I'm not sure whether I heard you correctly, when you talked about OAS 37 Latino students, high socioeconomic status, is that, you're saying that the Latino population has high socioeconomic status, or the whole school?
The whole school does, and I could look at that, but I'd take some time to pull it up. I have it right here, but I have a feeling because it's a school of choice, and maybe Robin, Dr. Ms. Swaski, you could help me on this one. Would you say also that the Latino population at OAS is a higher social economic status than the other schools?
Generally speaking, I'd say so, but I'm just going from my perception. I don't.
Don't we
if
have
the
a slide
data's-
that shows
does it
parent
show it?
educational level
Yeah, just the
later
fact
on?
that you had a large enough
We do.
subgroup there to show that indicates to me that probably all those 37 or somewhere close to that 37 have parents that went to college, which is highly unusual if you look at someplace like Cleveland, where it's
If you were to
dramatically
go
different.
ahead, and I can do that.
Or compared to Cesar Chavez.
Oops, I'm going
Or
the wrong way. If we were to go ahead, you're absolutely right, Ms. Harder, is that I have a chart here. And you can see that I do have OAS on this chart, and it only would be there if we had a sizable number of highly educated Latino students. So I think you made a great observation there. They probably do have a higher percentage than the other schools. To go back to where we're at. I know there's a faster way to do this, but.
There you go.
Well,
Okay.
You finish your presentation?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Go home. Any other questions about this particular?
Well, yes, I think it's just really important for us to always keep in mind that, especially at the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 schools on your list there.
These up here.
The socioeconomic level of the Latinos at those schools and the parent education levels of the Latinos at those schools are dramatically different from the other schools.
Until you get to
And-
Cleveland.
Exactly. So I'm saying the top 5
Right.
are quite different from Cleveland down to Cesar Chavez for the rest of them, really. Actually, that's not true. Santa Barbara Charter. Santa Barbara Charter, except for Santa Barbara Charter. So since socioeconomic level has such a profound impact and parent education level has such a profound impact on student performance, it's almost like this data can be misleading unless you break it out a little bit further.
To some extent, that's true, but also we have to look at, like, for instance, Washington, where you would say that, but Washington actually has its boundary. It draws its students from downtown Santa Barbara.
Yeah, but it does not report the GATE program separately. GATE program
There's
is
all very
predominantly white
few.
and very
Right,
high
but these are all Latino students right here.
school. Oh, I beg your pardon.
And so if you take it just the Latino students, they're actually drawn from pretty much the same area to a large extent as Franklin.
But as we said before, I think Washington was Washington one of the schools on the list?
Yes, and the reason why
had
is that
parent
I was,
education levels?
and one of the reasons why is you look over here, I could not get enough white students in these schools. That's why they're not on that chart. It's not necessarily because I couldn't find Latino students with high SES. It's I couldn't find enough white students to put them into that chart.
Okay.
But that chart is really a very strong commentary on the effectiveness of Cleveland's program.
It definitely is, and
I really, you know, I mean, we can't stress that enough.
well, you can also look
Mike
at
Vail
Adams.
has found a secret up there.
Well, you can look at Adams too. Adams is one of these schools that's got almost all Latino students, and they're doing quite good. They're up here in the top group if we eliminate
It's also
OAS.
a commentary on Santa Barbara Charter, which has a fairly high SES, socioeconomic status and
Right here.
education.
Yes,
No, that's not Santa Barbara Charter.
that's
Yes,
Santa Barbara Charter.
and is declining dramatically between 03.
Yeah, from here.
Yeah.
So this is a picture of what's going on in our district. Some schools are doing a pretty significant job and others are not, and I think that there needs to be commentaries, or discussion between, I know that Robin is trying to make sure they do talk to each other.
Yes, in fact, with the comment about Cleveland, I just had a recent discussion with Mike and kind of trying to shine the light on what exactly is happening, because we need to do that. We need to look at the schools that are kind of beating the odds, and what's different about what's happening at those schools. And so I've got some information that, I want to talk with the other principals as well to kind of dig a little deeper, but I can bring it in a board brief form, or we can do it, at a board meeting later.
If we move on to the next one is the math, and we get a similar picture here, except for it's a little bit different, but once again, here's Cleveland, number 2.
Yep.
And once again, look at that graph over here of Cleveland.
Yeah. No, it's just really outstanding.
There's something to be said about small schools, too.
Adams is also quite high up here, and it's also one of those schools that's almost all Latino. And so you actually have both those schools beating out Peabody, which is one of the higher, lowest Latino and highest white schools in the district. And API, which is a little bit more difficult, but we have the Cesar Chavez down here, which it went up, but we got a long ways to go there. And then we have Cleveland way up here again. I keep mentioning Cleveland and Adams. So the Latino students in these schools are doing quite well, okay, and they're getting pretty high scores. These are really decent scores up in the 700s area for your Latino students.
Harding is the only one with a big decline over a 2-year period. Is that
Harding right here, yeah, it kind of went up and then kind of went down. Here's the state average.
And Franklin, too.
Right.
Franklin's been going down.
Did I miss that?
This is the state right here, so these schools are all beating the state average for Latinos. So I know that Robin's working a lot with the elementary district, trying to figure out what's going on here and why are some schools doing better and others aren't, and I think this just kind of gives you a nice picture of what's going on. Question?
Yeah, these don't give the white students.
No,
so
this
we
is
can't,
all Latinos.
So we can't see what the gap is and whether the gap has
We'll get to that later, actually.
Okay. Okay.
Can I ask you one question about that?
Yes.
The Santa Barbara Charter on this one is so much better. How is it that they do better with the API than the other?
Oh, for the API versus the other?
Yeah.
API is calculated totally different than the percent proficient on the exam. So it's just a different way in which things are calculated.
Am I seeing?
Santa Barbara Charter, where are we at here? There it is right there. And is it up here? Is it right there? And
It's the
it
third
goes back.
highest.
No, that's Cleveland.
That's Cleveland.
That's Cleveland.
Maybe
yeah,
I didn't put Santa Barbara
Charter.
Charter in for some reason. There it is. We got one dot.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason why Santa Barbara Charter is not in is because there was no calculated API score for Santa Barbara Charter.
Okay.
And OAS has one dot, and that's it because there was no API calculated for them.
Okay. That makes more sense. Thank you.
Yeah, it's unfortunately this color is very similar to that color, and when you said that, I made the same mistake.
Thank you.
Mystery solved. But there are different calculations, and it's really sometimes you can get really different looks from the NCLB and the API.
Well, here's where the
Go
GATE
back.
program at Washington shows through on that one. Back.
Very few of these kids are in the GATE program at Washington. This
Back-
is just
back one.
Latinos.
Previous slide.
It's the next
Next
one.
slide. Where's it, the next slide? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go for it.
There.
Oh yeah, okay. And here you can see Washington, there's only a few Latino students in the GATE program. And so this is Latino and white GATE participation. And this is percent. And unfortunately, this is very misleading because it's one student. They only have 2 students in the GATE program, so it looks really strange here. But this is percent of students in the white population, and this is percent in Latino. And as you can see, there's a really disparity here between GATE participation, white and Latino.
When you put 4.7% as the elementary district GATE percentage,
Yes, which
that-
is considerably better than it used to be.
but that number reflects K6, is that correct?
No.
So that's only 3rd through 6th grade?
I believe that this is only the grades that GATE is identified in. I took the GATE percentages for those grades and worked it out. So the elementary school district has has gotten into an area that is, actually, we could have room for more GATE students in the elementary district. It'd be perfectly fine. That has a lot to do with the changing of the COGAT to the latest version of it.
Well,
It's really interesting that you see a school like Cleveland that's achieving at such high levels,
And
and yet
only
they
has-
only have 2 GATE identified students. So is there a discrepancy then between how they're performing on standardized tests and how they can perform on the COGAT?
Well, I think all it says is that as a whole, they're raising the whole student body. Instead of counting on some GATE students to raise up their scores, they're raising the whole student body's scores up.
and
Washington, of course, gets the benefit of having a lot of GATE kids, and so does Roosevelt, to help with their scores.
It does, these numbers are deeply disturbing, however, when you look at the number of the percentage of Latino students that are participating in the GATE program, that are identified as GATE students. I know that the Assistant Superintendent for Elementary is working with other district personnel to change the GATE identification process because this is so out of whack with our student population. And I hope that we get a report on that sometime soon.
Yeah.
Is 4.7 pretty consistent, that we've had the same sort of percentage?
No,
or-
we were up to closer to 10 at one point. That was about 4 years ago or something like that. So this is a more realistic number. Somewhere between 5 and 7% would be a decent number for number of students in a GATE program. Junior highs. Here's the junior highs. And you can see here we have La Colina. The Latinos at La Colina are doing very well on their NCLB percent proficient.
Again, that's a substantially different demographic, right?
There's the La Colina demographic, so we're looking at the green students only. That's how they do.
Is
talking
what
about the-
Dr. Noel is saying, that it may reflect
Higher
higher
SES.
socioeconomic
Higher-
Fewer
they have
English learners.
Higher income, fewer English learners.
Yeah.
That's very true. Could easily do that.
Okay. So those strong correlations are not, this does not contradict that research.
No.
It's consistent with it.
And you can see the state average has climbed each year, and we have not, we've sort of gone around it, but we're starting to fall behind except for La Colina. So, yes, Goleta Valley's had steady growth, so has La Colina, but last year, we don't have this year's results, but the previous year, both Santa Barbara Junior High and La Cumbre fell backwards on English for Latino students. But then you take a look at the math students and you see a total different picture here, because you see that La Cumbre is the best in the district in terms of its math scores for Latinos.
It's one of the best in the state.
I know. Well, here's the state, and so they're above the state average. The other three schools are below the state average in their math.
And I wanted to comment on that. That's alarming. In California, to be below the state average is alarming.
I would agree with that. You see some nice growth here in in Goleta Valley and in La Cumbre. You see kind of going sideways for La Colina, and Santa Barbara Junior High made some nice growth here, but you're right, these are pretty low scores for our Latino students.
Mr. Zettel. Yes. When we have such a powerful example of a successful math at the junior high school level at one school, do the other schools make visits? Do they go and learn from the,
After these scores came out, yes. The district math teachers and the junior high are all meeting together now and taking a look at the success of La Cumbre and how that program is achieving that. One of the things that perhaps has contributed, we know that the quality of teaching and the quality of the teacher is critical, and both of our program improvement schools had the opportunity when hiring was done in the summertime for openings in math. They had the first shot at who they got to hire, and I think that helped. But obviously there's some instructional strategies and pacing perhaps that they all need to emulate.
and I can think of one other variable. I know one of the teachers involved. I actually know two of them. And there is a really profound conviction that poor Latino students can do it just like anybody else. And that is a deeply held belief and a commitment. And I think it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, in part. Not the only variable, but an important one.
It's a very important variable. And that attitude has a lot to do with achievement of our children. The belief that all children can learn, and we are responsible for that learning. And that's critical. And those teachers, I know who you're talking about, they do have that passion and belief. Thank you.
What you're saying, though, goes back to something else, because then what's happening to La Cumbre in their English? Because these are the same kids. And so they're doing something great in math, but not so great in English, whereas here's La Colina doing something great in English.
But I think with that, you have to look at English learners and what access they can have to the math curriculum in a different way than they do to the English language curriculum. And that's where there's going to be a huge disparity between La Colina. And in fact, it almost makes it more dramatic for La Cumbre because there are so many more English learners at La Cumbre than there are at La Colina.
completely agree. So these are interesting things to look at, and how they play out in our schools. API, where once again you can see how API is different from No Child Left Behind, because here's the state API, and all of our schools are looking good in terms of the API scores, with La Colina leading the pack.
Yeah, but API, I mean, I really have to remind ourselves, you cannot disaggregate to the subject matter with the API. And, I mean, to
No.
me, it's much more important to look at those disaggregated scores by English, by subject matter, by math.
Right, and you also get clusters in CLB, and you don't need clusters in the subject areas for the API. You just get the API.
But this takes into consideration the full range of scores rather than just the bottom portion.
The API?
The API takes
Well, I
into-
think what Dr. Noel says what it does is that it throws the math and the English all together into a big mix, and it also throws in some science scores and some other
Fifth grade
scores.
science and-
Yeah, and so that it throws it all together. And so to one extent you can say the total overall picture is best displayed by the API, but as Dr. Noel says, then you don't get to see
different.
the details of it.
But the other scores were just the below basic, the lower end, the lower kids. This API, isn't that?
No, these are all kids these are all kids thrown together, and what percentage of them
Are
were
proficient.
right. So the ones that
But
are
it doesn't
proficient,
differentiate between above proficient and
No,
all
no.
the different gradations, whereas the
No.
API does take into consideration those gradations.
yes, I understand what you're saying right now. There's a different weight given to each of the gradations for the API versus for this, it's just you have it or you don't have it. Right? Absolutely true. So there's the API scores. And here's the gate for the middle schools. Once again, doesn't look so good.
Have you looked at the, I'm certain, the longitudinal, a look at this would basically show the same distribution for many years?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It
How
really
many-
hasn't changed. Do we have that in your board focus goals?
Uh-huh.
You have 3 or 4 years in a row of this chart, so you can look at the board focus goals and see year after year after year the same picture. It hasn't changed much.
Is one school doing better than the other? It's hard to tell here.
In terms of,
Well,
it doesn't look like there's a much difference.
It's a district standard for identifying kids, so it seems like it would just sort of be based on who's going to whichever school. I mean, you have to look at what the district policy is on this, and this is something that the district needs to work on.
It's not just in our district that there's
No,
this difficulty.
Yes, absolutely.
Most districts have the same problem of how do you find the gate kids that are in the minority, the non-English populations. And that is a difficult task to do, especially for kids that are English learners. How do you find them? They're there, but how do you find them? There's another problem we have in our district, but I'll get to that in a second. So here's the high schools, and here's, once again, here's the state, and all 3 of our high schools are doing better than the state on the English, and DP leading the pack. And for the first time, first time in years, maybe Paul, is he still here? Yeah. I don't know how many years this goes back, but it looks like Santa Barbara has passed San Marcos for Latinos in English language arts. And remember over here, we're talking about pretty much all schools except for DP is a little bit different, but these schools are very similar in their makeup.
And the socioeconomic status, parent education, English learner.
It's probably larger
percentages.
in Santa Barbara High than it is in San Marcos.
And how about DP?
DP is different.
DP has a smaller population and
Probably has a higher SES. I haven't actually broken it up by percentages of English learners in each of the 3 schools, but we could do that. And here's the math. And once again, here's the state average, and I once again will point out that San Marcos has dropped below the state average in math. This is all based on the 10th grade Casey. This, so you know, this is not STAR. And then we have the STAR, which is what API is based upon. So this is now STAR results, and you can see that once again San Marcos has dropped below the state average. Strong gains by Santa Barbara High, and really strong gain, then a little bit dropping back by DP.
Well, they all had strong gains, but 203, 204.
They sure did. Sustaining that was difficult to do for all the schools. And this is API, which is based upon 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, based upon the Casey and the STAR testing. Okay, so it's got a lot of things thrown into it.
Can you really do longitudinal data with API base?
No, you really can't. And it does adjust each year, but it doesn't adjust by much. It adjusts by 10 or 15 points, and so they do warn you against doing that. But large changes are still pretty evidence of something changing, and so
Large is how much?
well, these are large changes, so that shows strong growth. Changes like between these 2 years could easily just be the recalculation of the formula for the base.
How about between 05 or 06, 07?
Well, I don't like the fact that even though now each year can be compared within itself, and if you look at this, San Marcos was way above the state average, and so is Santa Barbara High. They both lost ground to the state average. So this comparison is perfectly valid, and that comparison is perfectly valid. And so, go ahead.
Well, GP was flat.
And DP, if you wanted to look at just that, looking at 1 year and the next year, DP should have gone to about there. So you're right, we shouldn't really go longitudinal unless we see large changes, because the base doesn't change by that much. But we can compare within years with no problem.
But the real issue is how they did on the growth, base to growth, right?
Well, the base to growth just means that you made your API target. It doesn't say anything about whether you're doing great as a school. Because you can make your API target if you're way down here, you can make a target, but it doesn't mean that you're doing really well. I think the state average is a better thing maybe to look at in terms of how well is your school doing. Does that make sense?
Well, I don't want to.
Okay.
We could have a longer discussion.
Yeah, we could. Here's the gate percentages. Now, you'll see here that this is our average. 25.6% of the students in the secondary district are labeled as gate.
Does that includes the
That includes everybody, junior highs and high.
So does that mean that
Secondary district.
that if a student is in one gate class and
They're
all the
no, it's not
they're-
gate classes. It's identified in the
as-
student information system as having a gate identification.
And the
Eh,
state regulations are what?
Well, there's no state regulations on how many you have. I'm saying that
No,
in
the
general, in general, you are looking between 5 and 7% to be gate identified. You must note here that 40% or more of our white students are labeled as gate.
Oh my gosh. How do they get labeled? We didn't get a junior high one of these, did we?
Yeah, you did.
A percentage, did we?
Yeah.
What
Yes,
was
you did.
the-
Excuse me for my language.
Didn't hear it.
Same thing, around 40%. It won't change much from junior high to your high.
Those figures haven't changed much in 10 years.
No.
No.
But here's the question. Do they come to us from other districts identified as gate students?
Well, you have a couple of phenomenons happening here.
Okay.
One is that if you go back 10 years or so ago, our district had very liberal policies for how you got into gate. So to some extent, maybe of this 25% that we have, that I've shown here for the district average, we may have been responsible for a good 15% of, or 50% of that. Or we maybe, if it was just our own districts, we might be at 15 or so percent GATE students in the secondary district because of our liberal policies of identification from 10 or 15 years ago. And it's just making its way through the system. But the second part of that is that some of our neighboring districts have very liberal identification policies. And so we get those students then when they go from elementary district feeder schools into our secondary district, all of a sudden we get a huge bump in GATE identified students. And it's almost all white students.
It used to be that the Santa Barbara district required a new GATE test for and now we don't. Is that right?
Well, if they come in from identified as GATE from an elementary district that has proper, quote, proper identification procedures, then yes, we accept them.
So that's like a change in the last 5 years or so, I think.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it was right before you came on. It was about 3 or 4 years ago. If you were a 6th grade student at one of the feeder elementaries, you had to retake it.
But unfortunately, what they retook was the old COGAT, which allowed a lot of kids in anyway.
Anyway, yeah. But it's interesting, if you look at our feeder elementaries, a lot of their students are, the schools will be at 30% GATE. It's very different from Santa Barbara Elementary.
So there's a twofold problem. Our own problem of over-identification from 10 or 15 years ago, and then the over-identification of the feeder districts.
But also our own identification for Santa Barbara Secondary is more liberal than our existing, right now it's more liberal than the elementary. So it's something to look at.
Well, are you tightening this up or?
Well, it's not just me, but yes, there's people that, there's a GATE coordinator, Teresa
Kuntz, and that was
Kuntz.
one reason that at the elementary level we decided to get a director of programs so that we could really look at this and figure out what's going on. First of all, really, how do we identify more of our Latino students, English learners in particular, and then working with Sandy Robertson, and they work very closely together about this issue, how to, the two districts are really different in the GATE identification and then just what the percentages are.
Teresa put together a really nice spreadsheet of how other districts are trying to identify Latino students. And recently I've found some articles for her that show a process by which you could do this. And I think Teresa's going to put together the articles that I've been giving her and the information from other districts, and she's going to put it all together. And we're probably going to revise our identification process to try and find those students, Latino students who are should be GATE identified but have not been identified with our current procedures.
What about at junior high school?
Don't know.
Just a quick question, may we see that in a board brief?
The report
articles
that,
and the
sure,
and the
we can
report?
do that.
Okay.
And
No?
You are,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
the
Actually,
articles may be large.
one of the articles is quite technical, but the other one is much more, it's still technical, but I think it'd be easier to read. So I can bring that up for you.
I want to come back to the issue of the gap because we talk about how liberal our policies are, but I think you could go back 25 years or more to whenever GATE started, and the gap would look essentially the same.
Actually, it probably would have been worse.
It might have been worse. So regardless of how loose our policies have been, they've been loose for white students apparently. They have not apparently been loose for Latino students, because Latino students are still, and if you look back at the elementary data, where we're not
identifying them.
We're not taking students from other districts. We're looking at our own district students, and there's virtually no percentage
I agree
of
with you
Latino
completely.
students in GATE.
Actually, this would be perfectly fine. It's kind of one of those odd things. Because of our liberal policies in the past, and because of some of the other liberal policies of surrounding districts, the number of Latinos that are in GATE is actually pretty close to where it's supposed to be at. If you look at this down here, this is the number that's all wrong. This is actually pretty decent. If we can bring this down to here, we wouldn't really need to identify more Latinos. We have plenty of Latinos identified.
I disagree.
Well,
Because-
9% is about where you want to be, or actually 7% would be perfect.
I think we're looking, I mean, we're disagreeing on semantics.
Okay.
10% is not where I want to be if white students are at 45%.
Completely agree.
And the my concern is not that we should bring down the number of white students. We should figure out why and eliminate the discrepancy between the way the Latino students are being targeted and the way that the white students are being targeted. And if that results in bringing all of them up to 45%, then maybe. If that results in all of them being at 25%, maybe. To me, it's much more important to reduce the gap. And because in order to reduce the gap, we would have to address whatever the factors are that are creating that gap. And that would have ramifications across the board, not just in Gate.
Well, we've been talking about those factors up until now, without raising the possibility that racism is one of them. And I hear racism, discrimination, the tests are biased. They're not picking out qualified Latinos, or the other one, the teacher recommendations, which is the alternative way of getting it, somehow reflect biases. But up until now, we've been talking about parent education, family income, English language learners as the three main demographic factors. And it would seem to me that that if this is an empirical question I ask you, Dr. Davis, if we put that together in a regression equation with those factors and then some kind of a selection variable, I would suggest, and I would expect, like in every other piece of educational research, first and foremost is going to be parent education, income, and English language learners.
Well, since we're on this topic, I'll skip through the rest of this.
I just want to interrupt for 1 second.
Go to what you're talking about.
10:30.
That's
and
right.
I'm happy to continue the discussion. I just want to make sure the board members know where we're at, and we still have to get to a couple of consent agenda items. Okay.
Sorry to make this so long. If we go forward to what you're just talking about, this is very interesting to me. This is where I'm only looking at highly educated, not EL, and not special education students, Latino and white. So this is close to the end. And you'll notice that I only have 4 schools that have enough students to actually look at those comparisons. And actually in 2 of the schools, the Latino students are doing better than the white students. Exactly. And in 2 of the schools, they're doing worse. Now, you got to understand, Washington has that large number of fairly high SES educated white students, which balloons this up. In the elementary school district,
And OAS has the opposite, right? Has more, has a disproportionate share of
high SES,
high education, high income Latinos.
probably.
I mean, it was
yes.
actually interesting looking at this, seeing the Latino students doing better at 4 of our schools than the white students are at 2 of our schools.
2 of the schools versus 2
Yeah.
of the schools.
Yeah.
So this is very interesting for me when I do this comparison, but then the next graph, this goes to our middle schools, and you notice that all of a sudden every middle school there's a gap. And then if we go to the high schools, the gap widens. So what is going on here? Are the kids self-selecting out of difficult classes, or what's going on that as the students, is it our fault? Is it parents' fault? I mean, fault may be the wrong word, but what's going on? And we have talked about this. Once I put this up with my colleagues, we've gone back and forth about all sorts of possibilities as to why the gap seems to get bigger as we go on.
I'd like to know more about this selecting out.
Well, whether the
Do you
students...
have any evidence on that?
Well, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that as the students go higher up, they decide they don't want to be involved in the more difficult classes. And whether that is the students deciding, or is it the peer pressure, or is it the faculty at the schools deciding? I don't know which of those counts the most.
I would like to see us get better than anecdotal data on that. That's a critical question.
It is a critical question. I'd like to see more data too.
You're the director of research, go get it.
Give me some staff members.
But I think it's also interesting to look at, there is a gap at every school, but also if some of the schools, for math or for English, you can compare across the schools.
Right,
and
like
see
for the
that
middle schools, for
For
instance.
the middle schools, for instance, that Anglos or Latinos at La Colina, I think, are doing better than Anglos at La Cumbra and in English, and it's vice versa for math. La Cumbra
Well,
Latinos
the math scores-
are doing better than La Colina English students.
The math scores are a little more difficult.
Can I
If we,
ask-
okay, go ahead.
No, just a question, getting back to what Dr. Noel raised. Would it be possible to track back, to take gate-identified Latino students who are in high school now and trace back to where they went to junior high, where they went to elementary school, just within our Santa Barbara district, so that you're only connecting to Santa Barbara Elementary?
You're asking to do something that I want to do, but there's problems
Got
with
it,
that.
it's staffing, okay.
Well, it's not just staffing, it's data systems. To go back past SASE XP, we got to go back into SASE 3, and then we got to go back into Pertain. There's multiple difficulties in doing what you just asked, and yes, I want to do that, but it's actually going to be easier for us to track forward from now on, assuming that we have a stable system for another 5 or 6 years. Going backwards, I might be able to go back 4 years or 5 years, but going back further than that gets more and more difficult.
I have to speculate, though, that even going back that far might be useful in seeing the drop-off between junior high and high school.
Right, because the other factor in here is that how long have we been having decent assessments that I can actually make a comparison from one year to the next, and that's another whole problem.
Do we not get a significant population of returnees from private school out of the K-8 privates to high school?
Absolutely. We get people returning to the
They're
district.
predominantly white and would
Yes.
contribute to the gap.
Yeah, but you're assuming that they're all GATE students then?
I'm just assuming that.
Well, actually, what you're talking about is that this gap right here should then stay the same in high schools, but unfortunately, this is math. We can't use math because math, it becomes individual test in high school. So I have to use this. This is the middle school gap, and then the high school gap gets bigger. That shouldn't occur from many of the private schools that are K through 6. If we have a K through 8 private school, yes, that could contribute to it.
I was talking about K-8.
Yeah.
Talking about 8th graders leaving private school, coming to high school.
But
So-
this data would contradict the socioeconomic
Yes.
explanation for the
Yes.
gap.
It says something else is going on.
Yeah, which is, I mean, there's lots of research out there that also supports this, that there are something else going on, because when you control for socioeconomic status, family background, et cetera, those gaps still.
This is with English learners
Exist.
thrown in. So you got to, well, no, English learners are thrown out. This is without English learners, all of these charts. So yes, this says that in elementary schools, we're not seeing much of a gap, and as we go forward, we get a bigger and bigger gap.
Well, we are seeing a fairly significant gap in some of our schools.
In some of our schools, yes, but in some of our schools, not. Peabody is a pretty large school. It's got a lot of Latinos and white students, and we get pretty similar scores.
But I really think it also speaks to the fact that the schools are doing different things, and some are more successful than others.
True.
There may be a gap all the way through for some of them, but there's Latino students at this school are doing better than Latino students at that school in certain subject areas, and there's a lot of work to be done.
Okay, we're getting late here. Let's see if there's anything else that I want to show you. So we got through this one. Not graduating. Now you can't really look at these numbers because we haven't finished putting in the Casey results for this year. But this is something I was talking to Paul a little bit earlier. Even the numbers of students passing the Casey in 10th grade seems to be going down. Okay, and I don't know what's going on there. This was a different year. This year, the students did not have to pass the KC to graduate from high school, and this year they did. And so we had a larger number of students not graduating from high school because they couldn't pass the KC. So there's a jump that happened right there. But this, I hope, will get to be parallel here, but I don't have the data yet. We have 2 more KC exams to throw in here. So we'll get more on that later on. But these are Latino students not graduating from high school, and number not graduating, and Santa Barbara, San Marcos, and DP.
Do you know anecdotally what the percentage is of white students not graduating, or how that, where their line would likely fall in there?
It would be down in here. It would be very, very few. But this is ELs included. If you got rid of the ELs and the RFEPs, well, actually RFEPs would do pretty good. If you got rid of the ELs, these numbers would probably drop in half, if not more. Okay, so these are not many. 20 kids, 15 kids or something like that, and 28 or so kids. It's not many, but and a lot of those, like I say, are ELs. Probably half of them are ELs. Okay, and students in AP courses, this is a replication of what you're seeing for the other ones. It's not what we want.
My question there is, how does that compare to 0506? Was there any improvement?
That also is in the board focus goals, if you want to look at those. And no, not really any improvement. And here's Latino dual enrollment. And fall and spring, I don't put summer in there because it clouds the picture too much. And you can see that in the fall there's less than there is in the spring in terms of dual enrollment students. You can see that Santa Barbara High is really increasing dramatically its dual enrollment students. You can see that DP has been somewhat stable. This dot refers to that dot. It's pretty much the same. And this dot here would go to that dot.
But aren't there more dual enrollment classes offered on the Santa Barbara High School campus than either of the other 2 high schools?
Is there, Paul?
If you don't include work experience, I think it's called, yes.
If you don't include work experience, he says yes.
Okay.
Once again, San Marcos is trailing the pack. Yes.
By dual enrollment, you mean both at the school and going to City College, or just at?
They're enrolled in Santa Barbara City College
So
classes
both.
and in high school classes.
No, I mean at the high school campus and at the Santa Barbara City College campus.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
So can't they be dual enrollment in classes that are on their
At-
high school campus?
If the Santa Barbara City College has a class at the campus, they can be dual
So it wouldn't
enrolled.
necessarily be at City College. Is that what you were asking? Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
Either or. This is Latino and white enrollment in Cal State schools, and actually nice significant gains overall.
By Cal State, you mean CSUs and UCs?
Yes. No, this is just Cal State.
Cal
This is
State.
just Cal State, not UC's. UC doesn't have a nice web page to publish all this. Cal State does. And so you can see a nice tracking of it over the years.
Are those numbers on the side there, 5 and so forth? That's just the number, not a percentage?
That's the
right?
number, not percent.
So it's very small numbers we're talking
Right,
about.
but it's small numbers for white students too.
Yeah.
I put in light lines, the white student lines. So it's not, I don't know, it's not as good as it should be, but
Well,
We're-
this just seems like such a limited, if you're just looking at the Cal State schools, I mean, you get more money from private schools for scholarships and so forth. That might be something that's more attractive to Latino students. I just think you kind of need a fuller picture.
well, when you consider that there's about equal enrollments or somewhat similar for 2 of the schools and close to it for the DP, you would want this number and this number to be somewhat similar, although I can understand that number being higher because there's more white students at DP. But for Santa Barbara High, it's half the number, which is not as bad as in some of the other categories, but you'd like to see this number be similar to that one.
Yeah, but these numbers are highly dependent on income, on family income. It costs money to send a kid away to school.
Well, and I'm actually seeing it from a different point of view. I'm wondering if those numbers are worse than they appear because more of the white students might be attending a UC, and therefore their numbers in
UCs
CSU
would be higher.
are actually lowered. And if you just compared students going to a four-year institution, that the gap might be even larger.
I completely concur with you. But in terms of the, I agree with you too, Dr. Knoll, but I think that by this time, a good number of these are not your low socioeconomic students. They're probably from middle class, Latino, and white families.
Well, you just sit through an award ceremony, and it's just, it's right there for you. You see the Latino kids are predominantly going to City College.
Right.
And Mrs. Harder and I discussed it at such an occasion recently that if we only had a four-year school other than UC in this town, it would change these numbers. The nearest one is
Channel Islands, right?
You know, and before that, Northridge. You know, $8,000 or $9,000 a year for room and board, minimum.
I actually wonder if that spike up might be related to the opening of Cal State Channel Islands.
Well, that could be. I don't believe. I remember looking at these numbers that Cal State Channel Islands had very many of our kids at it.
But
there were other ones that had larger numbers than that.
I also think that it's highly, I don't know, there's a lot of conjecture in assuming that it's based on economics, because
right.
when we looked at the AP and the GATE programs, which students take in order to make their applications for colleges more attractive, we saw that there were, if that's what you were looking at, if that's what colleges were looking at, there would be a huge difference between the Latino students and the white students in terms of the attractiveness of their transcripts to a university.
These are low numbers too.
I don't think we can negate all of that simply by saying it's economics.
Well, I think the overall thing is that even for the white students here, these are low numbers, and since you're right, most of the Latino students are going to Santa Barbara City College and not going to a four-year school. These are very low numbers that we need to do something about, or I suggest you do something about. And I think,
is there any way for you to get data on the number of students who would be academically eligible for a UC or CSU upon graduation?
yes.
Because it seems like that would be maybe a more useful, I don't know, more useful, but another useful set of data to look at, because that would not be dependent, well, there may be other reasons why it would be dependent on socioeconomic status, but we're not looking at students who actually go. We're looking at student
Who are eligible, and how many of the eligible went and didn't go?
Well, that would be good too, but even just
students who
just
completed the
for
A through G
us, just in
requirements.
terms of looking at how we are succeeding with our students,
Right.
how are we making them eligible, which we're not at comparable rates. No, we're not, I'm sure. But how incomparable is it?
I would love to do that, but once again, there is a problem with the SASE, which is the one that would have it in it. Aries is being corrected, but the UC qualified students in SASE was fraught with all sorts of problems. And so it would be
CDE
a nightmare to try and get that data out from SASE right now.
CDE has a database on A to G completions. I don't know that they disaggregate it by ethnicity, though.
Unfortunately, I find that that's a problem in some cases. So, and I think that's pretty much it. We did this highly educated stuff, and I went through why the math side of it is not easy to look at. Overall, we have a lot of work to do, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
No, but
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
But I think that we need to be having a board discussion about next steps. You know,
Yes.
what do we do with this information? So
Okay.
I will
Sorry.
have a conversation with the superintendent about it. Okay, we have 4 consent agenda items. D20.
That was my call. I simply wanted to ask Mr. Diaz, if he really means what he says here. This, down the next, right near the bottom, this analysis will provide specific comparative cost information and recommendations. It will answer once and for all the question. Now we've been asking that question for quite a few years around here, and I applaud you if you, I will applaud you. I'll be quiet if you don't answer it once and for all. If you answer it once and for all, you will be my hero.
Dr. Noel, I would never want you nor expect you to be quiet. So to answer your question, however, what this specific project will entail, as I've tried to present to you in the item, is this will be a detailed analysis. Now, she's only not to exceed $8,000, so we're not talking about a $50,000 two-year project. I wanted to get to a point where I could come to the board and say, yes, we should start the migration back to the county office, or no, we're in so deep now with the other system, it's not going to pay us to change. So yes, this will answer that question. If for some reason we do decide to begin the migration, it will be a timely process.
Okay.
But we need this done.
Okay.
Absolutely, I really applaud you for doing this.
We need this. We need to get this done.
Okay, I move to adopt that.
And I'll second that, but I do have a quick question on it. When do you expect the report to come back?
This won't be completed for some time, I would say several months, a couple, 3 months. She'll be here. She works at home. She comes into the office. She'll be going to both offices, looking at the county office. She works for them, does some work for them now. And she'll be spending time with our folks here. And I think we're going to get a good picture of what a real comparison looks like.
Okay, so we have a motion from Dr. Noel, a second from Ms. Parker. All those in favor of approving item D20 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. So that's the Castleberg Associates contract for an analysis of the business systems. D21, approval of purchase order report.
That was mine, and I withdraw that, so I move to adopt D21.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Noel and Cordero. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item D23, approval of award of contract extension to Greenkeeper for landscape maintenance at La Colina.
I simply had a comment, not a question. Fiscal impact, $23,800. What budget's that?
Right underneath there, it's general funds, secondary district grounds.
Well, I raised a question about it at one time a couple of years ago, being lottery funds, and I'm so pleased that it is not lottery funds. I move to adopt that.
Is there a second? So there's a motion by Dr. Noel, second by Ms. Parker. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Item D28, denial of bid protest by Shock Contracting Corporation.
What the heck happened to that? Just give me a second, I'll find it. Well, I can't find it. My God. My comments are lost in D28? No, I don't, that was an error. I move to adopt.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
So Noel and Parker, any discussion? All those in favor of approving the bid protest, the denial of the bid protest signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And award of contract. Denial of bid protest.
Thank you, thank you, and award of contract. Okay. Yes, that was understood by everyone when they voted. Okay. So we're at the conclusion of our agenda. Coming events, we have a meeting Friday afternoon, starts a few minutes before 5 o'clock. Board correspondence or board comments. Future agenda items, clearly yes. There are some from this meeting. Anything else? Then we will adjourn. Thank you.